Okay, and 1 second. And we're live.
Good morning. May I warmly welcome you to this virtual meeting of the Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council Regulatory Planning Committee on the 5th of May 2021. I'm Councillor Stuart Smith, Chairman of the committee, and I'm also joined this morning by the following Borough Councillors who are members of the Regulatory Committee, and they are Councillor Malcolm Head, my Vice Chair, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Watts, Councillor Eyre, Councillor Ovens, Councillor Head, Councillor Foggo, Councillor Lockwood, and Councillor Morgan. We are also joined by Claire Griffiths, the Development Service Manager, and Emma Garbett, the Legal Senior Officer, Helen Oakes, Highway Engineer, and Elizabeth Dales and David Boville, Democratic Services. I would just like to highlight some of the procedural differences we have put in place to help manage the meeting as effectively as possible. Please only speak after I have invited you to do so. Please say your name before speaking, as this will make it easier for the press and public to follow the meeting. Please mute your microphone when not speaking to avoid any background noise and ensure that any of the mobile devices are on silent or switched off. David Boville is present at this meeting and will mute microphones that have been left on, but it is important to remember that only you can unmute yourself. Those wishing to speak, please use the Teams meeting chat to indicate to do so, and you'll be called in to speak at the appropriate time. Please only use the meeting chat for this purpose, and do bear in mind that what's posted in the meeting chat can be seen by all participants of the meeting, including any public or external participants that may be joining via Teams. Can I ask that only regulatory committee members use the Teams meeting chat facility? Additional discussion on chat for those who are public speaking is not permitted. I would ask that those presenting their items do so in full, with questions being heard at the end. Any recommendations of the committee requiring a formal vote will be carried out by myself, asking for a response either for, against or abstain for each councillor on the committee. The order of votes is randomly generated and will change each time. The virtual meeting regulations require all participants to hear and be heard throughout the meeting. When voting, I will ask councillors to acknowledge that they do so having heard the debate in accordance with those regulations. Therefore, if you do feel that you have not had the opportunity to hear all the debate, please do alert me and abstain from voting. Should my connection as a chair be lost throughout the meeting, the vice chair will take over and a short adjournment may be called until the connection is resumed. Also, can we please ensure that any background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silence for the duration of the meeting. Arrangements have been made to facilitate public speaking either through video or telephone link. Contributions are limited to 3 minutes in line with usual procedures. Copies of written statements have been requested so that they can be read out by a planning officer in the event that connection is lost and cannot be restored. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to our agenda for this morning's meeting, and the first item is for apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interests. Do any councillors have any declarations of interest?
Chair, if I may, it's Councillor Eyre. On the first 2 plan applications, they are within the Normanby ward, and as a council for the Normanby ward, do I have to declare an interest, a non-pecuniary interest?
You can declare that you are the ward councillor and that you've had no discussion with anyone or give your opinion in relation to those applications.
Will I be able to speak on behalf on the planning application?
As a ward councillor?
Yes.
Well, if you do that, then you can't vote. So that gives the impression to me that you have an opinion on it.
I would like at the end, you know, when we go, when the committee members go into open debate, just to express my opinion.
That's fine, as long as you have an open and transparent opinion on this, whatever application you're referring to. you will be allowed, like all councillors, to give your views on that particular application after you've heard all the evidence and conversations in relation to it.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Can we then move on to item 3, the minutes of the taxi panel held on the 16th of April 2021. Can I have someone from that committee approve them, please?
Councillor Fogel.
Thank
Councillor
you,
Morgan.
And I'll take Councillor Fogel as approving them and Councillor Morgan as second. Thank you. Item 4 is to confirm the minutes of the Regulatory Committee held on the 28th of April 2021. Can I have someone move them, please?
Approved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Head. Can I have someone second them, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. So, Councillor Head approved them. Councillor Watts seconded them. Thank you. Item 5 is the Development Manager's presentation. I will now hand over to Claire for this part of the meeting.
So just to run through the procedures for today's meeting, there's been a planning officer's report prepared for all applications, and that has been pre-circulated. The report summarises the views of consultees, any comments received throughout the consultation, and information received from the applicant. It considers the policy context and other material planning considerations and makes a recommendation to the committee. Objectors, supporters, parish council and ward members and the applicant or their agent may address the committee under the direction of the chair. Those wishing to speak should have registered with officers before the meeting, and there is a time limit of 3 minutes for each speaker. Committee members may then ask questions of clarification through the chair. Officers may then be asked to comment on any further planning matters raised, and members will debate the application and formulate a motion or motions on which to vote. In the event of a tie, the chair has a casting vote, which is provided for in the Constitution, and the chair will announce the result of the vote, and the committee will then move on to the next application. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. We will now move on to the planning applications for decision, and the first one is our 2020-0071 FFM redesign of layout subject to planning permission, our 2019-0443, resulting in the erection of 36 additional dwellings, Woodcross Gate Phase 2 land off Flats Lane, Normanby, and the officer's recommendation is approval. And this is the time for you, Councillor Eyre, to come in and declare that you're a ward councillor.
Yes, Chair, I'm a ward councillor for the Normanby ward.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillor wishing to declare? Okay, we will now move on to the report presentation. And over to you, Claire. Thank you.
So hopefully you can see the screen, which I'm sharing the presentation, just so members can be familiar with the site. Most members will recall this site because it's been to planning committee in the past. So the application site relates to land off Flats Lane, Normanby, and the application site's the part outlined in red on the screen. So it's the western end of the site, with other land in the applicant's ownership and part of the wider development in blue. I've got the proposed overall site layout and then the layout plan for members' information. So I'll leave the layout plan up just so members have got that for information while I talk through the report. Permission is sought for a redesign of the layout approved under R 2019-0443 RMM, which is the Reserved Matters application, and the application in front of us today would result in an additional 36 dwellings. The application relates to Woodcock Wood, a housing site currently under construction by Miller Homes, which is located off Flats Lane, Normanby. The application site itself, so the bit outlined in red, is 7 hectares and forms part of the wider 22.8 hectare site for which planning permission has been granted. The wider site is bound by the north by the A174, to the east by Flats Lane, to the south by Flats Lane Woodland Park, and to the west by Woodland Belt with Longbank Farm further west. Members may recall that permission was granted in 2017 on an appeal for outline residential development on the site, followed by an application for reserved matters which was approved in 2019. These permissions sought consent for 400 dwellings consisting of a mix of 3, 4 and 5 bedroom properties. The current application seeks consent to amend part of the site layout and change the house types within part of the site which would be developed under phase 2. Within this second phase, there would be an increase from 222 dwellings to 258 dwellings, and the resulting mix is outlined on page 4 and the top of page 5 for members' information. Development has commenced on site, and the existing access from Flats Lane approved under the previous permissions would not be affected by this application. The general road layout and the structure of the approved layout would be unchanged, and this application would continue to comply with the outline and reserved matters permissions which is established the principle. The relevant policies are listed on page 5 of the report, along with the planning history on page 6. As a result of the consultation, we've received 9 representations, and those comments are listed on page 6 of the report. Northumbrian Water have recommended the use of a planning condition, which is at the top of page 7. Cleveland Police, the NHS, Highways England, Sabic Pipeline, and missing from the report is Northern Gas Networks, have all raised no objections to the application. The Ramblers have raised no objections, providing that action is taken to ensure the rights of way still remains, which runs through the centre of the site. Development engineers have commented, and their comments are in full on page 7, but I'll pick up Highways matters in the report. Public rights of way officers commented, and again they're quoted in full, along with planning strategy comments on page 8, 9 and 10 of the report, and 11, sorry. And I'll pick up policy considerations in a minute. The local lead flood authority have raised no objections subject to a condition, and there are no objections from environmental protection in relation to both contaminated land and in nuisance. So in terms of the considerations and the principle, the site is located outside of the development limits. However, outline planning permission was granted on appeal for residential development in 2016. Reserved matters was then granted in 2019 for 400 dwellings, which has been partially implemented. As of January, 43 dwellings had commenced on site, with 1 completed in phase 1. This is slightly less than we'd normally sort of expect to see in a year, but given last year's COVID restrictions on site build-outs and shutdown of housing sites, you know, a slower start on site has been expected and accepted. The first phase comprises of 127 dwellings. Members will be aware that the site is not allocated for residential development in the local plan, and this related to the timing of the local plan publication and the appeal decision. However, the site is identified as part of the housing supply for the 5-year housing supply for the council in table 3 of the local plan for 400 dwellings, as this is in accordance with the outline permission. The comments have been received from planning strategy in relation to condition 5 on the outline application, and this is noted. The condition was attached to the outline application to accord with the terms of the application, as the number of dwellings was not stated in the description of development. An outline application either has the numbers of dwellings as a maximum within the description, or you put a condition on so you can limit the reserved matters application. It is standard practice for such conditions to be attached or to be included in the description, but it does not preclude additional development coming forward. The application submitted is a standalone full application for phase 2 of the previously consented development and is not a variation to the outline or reserved matters approval. Therefore, should this permission be granted, the developers, when commencing phase 2, would implement this permission, so you'd end up resulting in sort of like 2 permissions over the overall site. The inspector, in granting the appeal at outline stage, considered that the site, subject to the provision enhancement of pedestrian routes within and adjoining the site, and a proposed bus service which has been achieved by the way of a section 106 agreement, was within a sustainable location, and his comments are quoted at paragraph 53 of the appeal decision, which we've included in the report at on page 12. The proposed development would continue to provide pedestrian routes and a bus service through the extant permission. Although it is acknowledged that the proposed development results in the provision of 36 additional dwellings, the links and access to shops and community facilities will remain unaltered, therefore maintaining the provision of a sustainable form of development. As a result, the proposed increase in dwelling numbers is considered acceptable, given the previous granting of outline permission and subsequent reserved matters applications, as well as the continued provision of links to local facilities. In terms of character and appearance, there is an established character through the dwellings under construction on site and the established planning permission. The proposed dwellings and house types will be of a similar design, and the palette of materials is the same as the existing dwellings, although we have recommended a condition to agree the final materials for each plot. Landscaping belts around the site and throughout the development and open space continues to be provided in accordance with the parameters and indications on the outline and reserved matters application. The proposed changes would respect the character of the site and the surroundings, and the application would accord with Part J of Policy SD4. In terms of impacts on neighbours, the majority of the changes take place within Phase 2, which is mainly in the centre of the wider site. Given the location of the changes, there would not be an impact on existing residents outside of the site in relation to overlooking or loss of privacy. Within the site, the development continues to achieve suitable levels of separation, so there are no issues in terms of overbearing impacts, overlooking or loss of privacy. The amended layout would have no adverse impacts in terms of neighbour amenity, and the application accords with Part B of Policy SD4. The original application was supported by a transport assessment back in 2016, and an addendum to this assessment has been submitted with the current application. The original application looked at the impacts of the development on the existing road network along with a number of key junctions at the time. The original assessment was based on 400 dwellings. The current application, as members are aware, seeks redesign for Phase 2, resulting in the 36 extra dwellings. The additional dwellings would result, on average, in 26 two-way vehicle trips in the weekday AM peak and 25 two-way vehicle trips in the weekday PM peak. The supplementary planning statement, transport statement accompanying the application, has assessed the impacts on the junctions listed on page 14 of the report. The increase in dwellings would not have a significant impact on any of these junctions, which would continue to operate within capacity. The outline application included a number of conditions related to off-site highway works, one which is related to the junction at Normanby Top, that works have to be done by the 100th dwelling. This condition would continue to be applicable, apply to the development, and would need to be complied with. The development engineers have reviewed the application and have raised no objections to the proposal. The public right-of-way continues to be provided throughout the site, which is also a bridleway, and is unaffected by the changes. The Section 106 agreed on the original outline continues to remain applicable to the development in relation to the provision of a bus service for the site and the financial contributions to footpath improvement. The submitted drawings show sufficient parking for each plot through a mix of integral garages, detached garages and driveways, and the internal road layout continues to be acceptable. As a result, the application raises no issues in terms of highway safety. Matters in relation to flooding, ecology and landscaping were dealt with in 2016 outline application. The redesign of Phase 2 and the addition of 36 extra plots raises no issues in relation to these matters. Northumbrian Water and the Council's LLFA have reviewed the layout and commented they have no objections subject to a condition. In terms of the Section 106, the original permission dealt with contributions towards education, Flats Lane Country Park, and highway contributions to footpath improvements. Section 106 also dealt with the provision of affordable dwellings on site and the provision of a bus service. The changes do not impact on this original 106, and the contributions towards education, provision of bus services, and footpaths will continue to be provided. A deed of variation is proposed to ensure the increase in affordable provision on site, given the increase in numbers sought through this permission, and as a result, the application would accord with Policy H4 of the local plan. Since we've approved the original application, members will be aware we've adopted the local plan, which includes Policy N4 relating to the Special Protection Area at Corton. The revised Section 106 would seek a contribution of £200 per dwelling for the additional 36 dwellings provided over and above the original application. For the reasons I've outlined, the development is considered acceptable. The application raises no issues in terms of house design, layout, character appearances of the area, neighbour amenity, highway safety, flood risk and drainage, ecology or landscape. We acknowledge the site is outside the development limits and is not an allocated site. However, consideration also needs to be given of the fact that there is an established permission on the site. The development would continue to provide a mix of dwellings reflecting the mix in the local area and would comply with Policy H2 of the local plan. The inspector, in granting the outline permission, accepted the principle of residential development and that the site was in a sustainable location. Subject to the conditions in the section 106 that's indicated on pages 16 through to page 22 of the report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
You're on
Sorry.
mute, Councillor Smith. Oh,
Yeah, sorry, councillors. I was having problems with two screens and my mouse. Thank you, Claire. And now is the opportunity for councillors to ask questions or if they have queries in relation to the report that she has just given us. And I see that Councillor Eyre wishes to query or ask a question in relation to it. Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to update, Chair. On the Council Development Engineers report, it says that it will not result in any operational change in the Normanby Road / Cleveland Street traffic lights operation. Well, just to update, we're now in the process of altering the traffic light system at that junction to make a dedicated turn right off Cleveland Street going along to the Eston Road. It's just an update, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre, for that. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, I take it the site hasn't been increased in size. So to get the extra 36 houses in, they redesigned is it the whole area? And in the redesign, has that caused any loss of open space that was originally planned?
So no, the red line and the site area hasn't increased, and sort of the development principles haven't increased. It's changes within the layout, so sort of mix of house types, mix of semi-detached, detached, and no, the level of open space continues to be acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a question and probably a follow-up question, if that's okay. Claire, the planning strategy representation, how is that generated and who generates that? Where does the evidence come from for that?
So on most housing applications, we consult with the planning strategy team, who is headed up by Rebecca Wren. They're the team that produced the local plan and all the background evidence behind it. And they'll provide comments to us, which we then assess in terms of a planning application. So they'll sort of provide the information in terms of the plan and the policy, and then it's for us in development management to assess that against all the other consultation responses and the assessment of the application.
Thanks, Claire. Chair, if I can, Claire, reading through the representation, there's a lot of issues there that planning strategy have. If I can just quote a couple, they think that it would be unsuitable for residential intensification. This application is less sustainable than the last, and low density should not be the low density housing shouldn't be avoided because we don't have a problem with housing supply. So how do we get from planning strategy not supporting this application to getting a recommendation for approval?
So planning strategy, a look at it in terms of pure local plan policies. We then, as development management officers, have to balance that in terms of all other considerations. So looking at previous appeal decisions, looking at what the inspector said. Obviously, when the inspector granted this site, he said it was a sustainable site. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been granted, subject to the mitigation of the bus service being provided through the 106 and the footpath link improvements. I don't feel as a planner that we could then go against that appeal decision. That's a key consideration. So an argument on sustainability grounds for an extra 36 dwellings when you're already saying 400 sustainable, in my opinion, wouldn't be justified or supported on appeal. So it's looking at that balance of it. The density levels, there's nothing in the National Planning Policy Framework that talks about density levels anymore. It's site by site basis. It's not overdevelopment of the site. The numbers can be easily accommodated on site by still achieving suitable levels of separation, suitable levels of open space. Transport requirements are acceptable. So on that balance, it's deemed that it's now acceptable form of development to increase the numbers.
Thanks, Claire. Chair, if I can, just one more. The last appeal, the decision mentioned that the site shouldn't go over 400. How have we got to an approval for a site now over 400 properties?
So as I mentioned in the report, there's two ways to deal with outline applications and numbers. You have to put a limit on so your reserved matters knows where it can apply to, because your reserved matters has got to be in accordance with the outline application. So you can't increase numbers through a reserved matters application. Normally it's done through the description. The description would be residential development of X numbers of houses. For this site, they didn't include the numbers in the description. So the inspector, for the avoidance of doubt, put a number limit within as a condition. It's no different to when you do a full application, you describe how many numbers of dwellings. You either do it in the description or you do it by condition. It doesn't stop applications coming back in to change that number. There's two ways you could do it. You could either do it as a variation of condition, but because this is a full application and is going to sit in isolation, there's no need to amend that condition. They just transfer over to this. It's no different to a number of housing sites we've dealt with in the past. For example, Swans Corner, Ormsby Bank. That was a full planning application for, I think, 128 dwellings was in the description. They wanted to, as market changes and house types change, they changed the layout and increased that by another 30 dwellings. So it does happen on all sites. Sometimes the number's in the description, sometimes it's by a condition, but it doesn't preclude you coming forward and applying for more.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, do you have a copy of the original layout? Because this would be useful to see what changes have been implemented to make room for these additional properties.
I can get that up on a system and then screen share. So I don't know if you want to listen to the two speakers and then I can have that plan ready to share as the debate opens up.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from what Councillor Baldwin said, that in the planning strategy section, second last paragraph, it says consideration should be given to compatibility proposal with Policyh SD4, supporting guidance that other relevant policies in the plan, taking into account the wider impacts on local services and infrastructure, and the need for any further developer contributions, having regard to existing obligations. So are we getting, other than the Cleveland, the SPA Ramsar site donation, are we increasing the developer contributions for the extra houses to help support the infrastructure?
So we'll get additional affordable, so there'll be 15% of the additional 36 will be provided as affordable units, so that will increase. The NHS have come back with no comments to make on the application, so there's no requirements to be sought from that. In terms of education, the original section 106 talked about feasibility study to agree that the amount to be spent no more than, and it set a maximum figure. As part of a deed of variation, the agents last year requested that feasibility study be removed and they just pay the maximum amount. So education have said on the proviso that we're now getting the full maximum amount without having to do any studies that could have reduced that amount. There's no additional education issues in this area from the 36 dwellings. The bus route wasn't a financial contribution, that was just to be provided throughout the site, so will continue to to do so. And the footpath improvements wasn't based on numbers of dwellings, it was based on costs of works. So the increase in dwellings won't affect that provision. So we are securing extra provision in terms of affordable, which is the only requirement for the increase in dwellings.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Ovens.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick query. What was is the final total going to be on site, Claire? It'll save me scrolling back to find it.
So it's an extra 36 dwellings. So instead of 400, it'll be 436.
Right, okie dokie.
But all those 36 are provided within phase 2.
Yeah.
So that's where there'll be the increase.
Okay, the other thing was, I thought I saw somewhere about a 106 agreement where some of the money will be going over to Cotham. Can you remind me about how that works? Is it because it's within a certain mileage or something? Because it seems quite a long way away and not of benefit to the immediate area.
So it's all linked to policy N4 of the local plan, which came in 2018.
Yeah.
That policy looked at the impacts on Cotham special protection area, sort of the sand dune area at Cotham, and thought that within 6 kilometres people are likely to travel to Cotham area, and there would be an increase in terms of visitors and impacts on those sand dunes. So as part of the local plan, we look at a recreation management plan for that area, with it being a special protection area. And the contribution set at £200 per net increase in dwelling. So because there's an increase of 36 dwellings on this site, we'd be seeking a contribution of 200 times by 36, which will be secured through a 106. It's no different to the 106s we've secured on a range of residential sites throughout the borough for this payment.
Oh, I appreciate that. It just seems they're difficult to consider when it's such a distance. And finally, it's just a comment from me, really, is regards the not being pressure on NHS or pressure on schools, and it's all adequate and everything. If you look at the state of Nunthorpe School, you wonder how long it can limp along. And it was always full and bursting, and it was always said at the original application that pupils would have to go much further afield to access secondary education. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Stuart.
Claire, I have a question. You have given numbers of the increase in particular types, i.e. bedroom size. Am I right in thinking there's no increase in the 2-bedroom dwellings with this additional 36?
I'd have to get them. The numbers are in of the mix of what phase 2 would be. I'd have to dig out the original application to sort of tell you what it was and what it's going to, which I can try and do quickly while the public are speaking.
Sorry to give you additional work. We don't seem to have any more questions or queries for Claire.
Can I just come in, sorry, Chair, before you introduce the public speakers, just to make members aware, we did have a phone call yesterday from a resident who was wanting to speak, but she can't attend today's meeting. She did ask whether a speech could be read out on her behalf, which I said isn't what we allow, and said, you know, she could find someone on her behalf. She hasn't found anyone on her behalf to read out a full speech, but I understand Councillor Chris Gallagher might mention 1 or 2 of her points. Just to make members also aware, there was 10 emails received last night, including photos from the resident. This was after the cut-off time for circulating photos, which is why they haven't been circulated to members. But I just wanted to make you aware that was in the background.
Okay, thanks, Claire. We'll now move on to our public speaking section of this application. And our first speaker is Councillor Chris Gallagher, who is the ward member for this area. Good morning, Councillor Gallagher.
Good morning, Chair.
You have 3 minutes to give your views on this application, and the time will start when from you commence speaking. Go ahead in your own time.
Thank you, Chair. As obviously a ward councillor known me, I'm speaking on behalf of my residents' complaints and objections. This application seeks to use changing legislation in the National Planning Policy Framework, which is designed for brownfield schemes to increase their numbers on the pretext of making more effective use of land clause in Chapter 11. This has limited relevance in this case, as Woodcross Gate is a greenfield extension site which is in the early stages of development, and this borough does not have a shortage of current developments, and other housing land is available to meet local needs. In addition, when the inspector overturned the planning decision made by this council, he made a specific stipulation that the site should not exceed 400 homes requested, condition 5 of his ruling. Yet here we have a blatant attempt to negate his direction. In addition, I believe that SD4 in the local plan, paras F, G and J, are not being fully addressed in favour of the needs of the financial benefits to the developer. Although Northumbria Water has commented on the issues of surface water and foul discharges, it fails to mention the additional pressures being exerted on the supply side to the local Nunthorpe Reservoir, which not only services this site but also forms part of the supply network to Gisborough and Great Ayton. As more homes are getting built, the infrastructure is coming under greater strain. This includes not just utilities, but also the education and health provision, and a further 36 homes does not help. Congestion and traffic problems in Normanby area are also not helped by an increase of traffic movements, which I believe are going to be greater than suggested by the highways. Thus, adding to the numbers trying to exit and enter this site will also increase the potential for accidents and the congestion in the local area. Recent improvements to Flats Lane, where it joins the A174, has increased traffic flows and thus downstream congestion to the ward, all of which is detrimental to air quality and noise levels. With all the developments, the paving over of areas of land ends up increasing flooding risk. And coupled with global warming, we're building up, no pun intended, a bigger and bigger problem for the residents, not just this development, but also those living in the adjoining wards. In case you're in any doubt, I as a local councillor object to this development creep, and I feel that this requested expansion in numbers must be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do any of the committee members have any questions? Okay, we don't seem to. Thank you, Councillor Gallagher, for your comments on this application.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our second speaker, and it's Mr. Neil Westwick, who is the agent in relation to this application. Good morning, Mr. Westwick. Mr. Westwick, are you there? Hello, Mr. Westwick. We'll just wait. We obviously have lost Mr. Westwick offline. We will just wait a couple of minutes to see if we can reconnect.
All right. You should be okay now, Neil.
Thank you. Good morning, Christopher Harris. It's actually Christopher Harrison speaking on behalf of the applicant, Miller Homes, and the landowners. Hello.
You're on mute, Stuart.
So thanks, Councillor Fogel. Mr. Is it? Can I confirm it's Mr. Westwick speaking? Hello. Yes, but you're very faint. Can you come closer to?
Instead of Neil Westwick in respect of the planning application.
Okay, sorry, I didn't quite catch your surname.
It's Christopher Harrison speaking.
Sorry.
Instead of Neil Westwick on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Harrison, sorry about that. We obviously had a few technical problems. Good morning.
Morning.
That's better. We can hear you loud and clear now. You have 3 minutes to give your comments in relation to this application? Obviously, the time will start from when you start speaking, so go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair and members of Planning Committee. Christopher Harrison speaking on behalf of Miller Homes, the applicant, and also on behalf of the original landowners and promoters of the site. We've obviously heard much from the case officer and had benefit of the comprehensive report, so I don't propose to go over that. Just to highlight a number of points in response to what's been said. First and foremost, there are no statutory consultee concerns or objections in relation to this planning application to increase the number of units. All technical matters have been properly and fully addressed as part of the planning submission. The suitability and sustainability of the site was independently and rigorously tested at the public inquiry in 2017, and that inspector found that the site was a suitable location for residential development, and those factors remain relevant today. The principle of development on this site has been established through that planning permission, and what we have is a slight anomaly in that the planning permission was granted in June 2017, whereas the local plan was submitted in April 2017. So that's why the site isn't a residential allocation, it's a point of timing. In respect of the limit on the outline planning permission for 400 dwellings, that was to define the planning permission at that time, and in particular looking at the highways capacity in the network, because that's what was tested. So in increasing the number of units to 436, so the additional 36 dwellings, a further transport assessment has been undertaken. That has found that there will be no significant adverse effects as a result of this development, with less than one vehicle being generated every 2 minutes in the AM and PM peaks. So it falls well within daily variations of traffic movement. In respect of the National Planning Policy Framework, Chapters 11 and 12 deal with making effective use of land and delivering high quality, well-designed places. Neither of those are specific to brownfield sites. They apply to all developments. And in this instance, we have achieved a well-designed development efficiently using the land, which accords with prevailing standards. So residential amenity is not compromised, nor indeed is the open space as part of the wider development. Additionally, we have already made contributions of over £1.5 million towards education in the area.
3 minutes, Chair.
Will also deliver
Mr. Harrison,
affordable homes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. You've had your 3 minutes. I appreciate you stopping there.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Harrison? I have one from Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could I ask the agent, is the company satisfied and confident that with the additional 36 houses, the drainage water can be adequately handled? As we now know, the drainage system coming from the estate is connected to the main drains on Bexley Drive, on what's commonly known there as the Norman Conquest Estate. Are you satisfied and confident there that that drainage system will be able to handle the extra water going down on that system? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Harrison?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we are satisfied. Northumbrian Water have been consulted on the planning application and have confirmed they have no objection to the scheme, and our engineering team, Queensberry Design, have confirmed that there is capacity within the network and that the drainage on site has been designed to accommodate the extra 36 dwellings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. We currently don't seem to have a diagram of what your original plans were for this site. What changes have you made that meant there were an extra 36 properties, new properties, or was it that you needed the extra properties?
Thank you, Councillor. We've looked at the layout in conjunction with Miller Homes, looked at the mix of properties, and as was mentioned earlier, the red line boundary for the overall site hasn't changed. The road layout hasn't changed. But what we've been able to do is plot the new homes more efficiently, and through the change in unit types, increase the density and therefore provide the extra 36 homes. So we haven't compromised the open space. We haven't changed the road layout. It's just changing the mix and putting the units in more efficiently.
So do I understand from that you've used smaller houses, therefore got more in?
Yes.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Do we have any further questions from councillors for Mr. Harrison? We don't appear to. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for attending and giving your comments and answering the questions of the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for the technical difficulties at the beginning. Thank you.
No need to apologise. They do happen from time to time, unfortunately, under this virtual world that we're living in at the moment. Okay, that is the end of our speakers in relation to this application. Claire, is this a good opportunity for you to bring up the diagram that Councillor Watts has requested?
Yes, so I can share with you. Hopefully you should be able to see that. So that's the approved layout for phase 2, which sort of where my mouse runs is this western end. I don't know how clear it is on your laptops with it being quite a small scale plan. And then that's the layout that we're considering today. So as the agents confirmed and as I said in the report, there are no changes to the red edge. There are no changes to the road layout. There are no changes to the open space provision. It has been a result of looking at density and layout of house type. So whereas before you may have had a wider back garden, they've sort of maybe pushed the boundaries in or changed some of the house types around so you can achieve the extra 36 dwellings on the site. But there's no change to the red edge, no change to the open space, no change to the road layout. In terms of numbers, I know the chair asked for numbers. I don't have the exact mix for phase 2. I've only got the mix for the overall wider housing estate. So I can confirm that on the overall permission, there was 3, 4 and 5 bedrooms provided, and that is what is continued to be provided in the redesign of the layout. But like I say, I've only got figures for the full 400, not just phase 2, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Claire. Councillor Watts?
Thank you, Chair. Could we just have a longer look at the original application? It went too quick.
So I'll leave that up for a bit. So that's the original layout as was approved under the Reserve Matters application.
Do you want to change it now?
And then if I do that, you should hopefully now see what is being proposed.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Councillor Watts? You can see.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you. Okay. I will open it. Do we have it? Sorry. Do we have any other further questions or queries in relation to this application before I open it up for debate? Okay, we don't seem to, so I will open it up for debate amongst councillors, and hopefully a motion will come out of that. Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thanks, Chair. There's a number of issues, Chair. First of all, on the traffic on Flats Lane. That's all Flats Lane is. It's a country lane. It's a winding country lane. And even before, on the application there for 400 houses, there was concerns raised about the adequacy of Flats Lane at that end of Flats Lane, and the amount of extra traffic on it. Moving on to schools, Chair. Secondary modern. See, the nearest one there is at Nunthorpe School, and comments have been made by committee members regarding Nunthorpe School. Every year it is oversubscribed. Every parent in the area there wants their child there to go to Nunthorpe School, and that's not being derogatory of any other secondary modern school in the area. So schooling is going to be pushed to the limits, and in my opinion, parents there will have to send their children outside of the area. Drainage. I'm not satisfied, and as many of the residents and the other ward councillors are fully aware that even on the original 400 houses, that the drainage system can adequately cope with the extra 400 houses, and now the application for a further 36. The drainage system goes has now been underneath the parkway, and it joins the main system on Bexley Drive. That's not the problem. The problem there that we've got on Flats Lane is when we have a sustained downpour of rain, and we get that more frequently there than what we're used to. And an example was just a few months ago at Flats Lane, in between South Park Avenue and Hollywalk, where the general dealer shop. It always floods there. Always floods there. It not only floods the road, we've had flooding at the shop, and opposite the shop, and opposite the shop on the Flats Lane side. The recent one a few months ago, it flooded their gardens. So in my opinion, the drainage system, and may I add that Northumbria Water are well aware of this, because each time we've had flooding, and I've lived up here now on 24 years now, and it is a major problem there for residents. Despite what the agent and what Northumbria Water advised there, that it wouldn't be a problem. In practicality, so that may be in theory, but in practicality, it is a major problem. And it's at the distress of the residents living very near the where it floods. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Watts.
Sorry, Chair. I thought Cliff Foggo was
Yeah,
before.
I've just realised my mistake. I lost track of my chat. Sorry, I was going to bring.
Councillor Foggo, I don't need to speak at the moment, thanks.
All right, I was going to bring you in, Cliff, after Councillor Watts. Sorry, Councillor Watts, go ahead. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it is me, is it? Thank you.
It is, yes.
I'm concerned about this development. It went in, obviously, on appeal in the first place. Locals, councillors were not happy with it. Now we find this alteration. I don't think the people buying the houses are going to be very happy with it. They've been squashed in again just to make more money. And I really feel that we've got to stick to our guns. This site has gone against public wishes, but it's going ahead, fair enough. But this extra housing, I think, is adding insult to injury. And I don't think we can allow this because of all the issues that Councillor Eyre has raised. It certainly is not an positive addition to the area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Do we have anyone else wishing to make comment?
I believe Councillor Baldwin has requested to speak, Councillor.
Go ahead, Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. I've asked Claire to bring up a document. It shows. I'll wait till she brings it up. It shows down in the bottom. It shows in the bottom right-hand corner, Claire. I think an example of how we're explaining the increase in numbers. There seems to be almost an increase in what looks like a terrace of 15 properties. I'm presuming that's going to be the new affordable properties. Similar to Councillor Watts, I'm just not very happy about the proposed new layout. The application wasn't popular when it first arrived at us, and it remains to be unpopular, and it's going to be more unpopular when we no doubt pass this, because I can't think of any reason why or how we would deny it. I think we're just going to have to be unpopular and pass it, unfortunately. But that bottom right hand corner just shows very well, I think, the way that they want to make more money from this application, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Foggo, did you wish to speak at any point?
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Claire, you state you wish to come in.
Yeah, just to pick up on some of the points I've heard in the debate. The plan I'm sharing on screen does show the layout, and there is a mix of affordable throughout that site. So as with phase one, the affordable houses is mixed through, and there's sort of two areas. There's an area of affordable provided sort of in the middle of the site and then to sort of what is the southeast corner. So the affordable is mixed throughout the site, and the housing strategy team have reviewed that mix of affordable and have stated they're happy. Listening to the debate, I just want to pick up on a few points members have said in terms of where this might go. There's comments on traffic. The inspector on the outline application agreed that the traffic wasn't an issue. He accepted that 400 dwellings on site were acceptable. The access off Flats Lane has been considered acceptable and is not to be revisited on this application. We are purely looking at whether the additional 36 dwellings can be achieved within capacity. The transport study states it can be, and your council's development engineers are saying there are no objections on highways grounds. In terms of schools, as you've heard, the original application included a section 106, which sought an education contribution. 1.5 million is being provided to the council in terms of education contribution for the council to decide on what schools that needs to be addressed to as the development's phased out, where the pressures lie. In terms of Nunthorpe, as I understand it, a lot of the people come from outside of the borough, outside of their catchment for the school. So it will be those that will be pushed out rather than the people within the catchment. Drainage, I appreciate what Councillor Eyre said and what comments have been made. Members must be aware that Northumbrian Water are saying that the development is acceptable from a drainage point of view. They're the experts, and going against them does open the council up to costs as it would on highways. So I just need to draw your attention to those comments. I know there's been a lot of people said about the public didn't want it and there was a lot of opposition. While I don't dispute that, members need to remember they're not here to make decisions based on public interest and public views. You're here to make decisions based on the planning legislation that we need to follow and the policies within the local plan.
Hello, is that Ian? Ian, it's Debbie from planning. I'm just giving you a courtesy call because
Debbie, you're live. Just bear with us, councillors. We've got a. Okay. I will make a comment. Yeah, this application has over the years caused this committee some difficulties, and originally we did refuse it, but we've got to acknowledge that we lost the fight then, and it was overturned by the inspector, who was said that it's a suitable and sustainable location. The report states that there's no adverse effects on highways or, as stated, flooding. And I would prefer smaller properties because I think there's a shortage in this borough of smaller properties than we seem to be going for 4 or 5 bedroom. Where if you want to start a home, a 2-bedroomed property or a smaller property is much more, in my opinion, advantageous. It won't have any negative impact on outside the actual application site, and if people don't like the density of the properties, then they have got the choice not to buy them. So unfortunately, the evidence indicates, and that under planning legislation, that I can't see that we can reject this application. So I will be voting for it. Thank you. Councillor Eyre, you wanted to come back in, I understand?
Yes, Chair. Just a comment. We've heard and read from our traffic department, Northumbria Water, and the appeal inspector. They're basing their decisions on theory. It's a different story when it comes into practice, Chair. Different story, which is at the discomfort in many of the cases of the residents living in the area. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Councillor Eyre, we rely on those officers, and they are the experts in their field in relation to those subjects. So we've got to take what they are saying.
Yes, but I repeat, and I'll finish on it, Chair. I won't labour on it. That's in theory. And as we all aware, theory doesn't always turn into practice. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm not going to have a debate between ourselves. Okay, Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I accept we have to take the decisions of all the professionals. I think as ward councillors, we've all seen in practice that that doesn't work when it's actually in our wards. But I think the one thing I would say, which is a planning term, is that these extra houses have pushed this into an overdevelopment of site. And I would propose that we turn it down on that reason.
Councillor Ovens.
Yeah, it was more an observation than anything else. I know we've gone on to a different section. When we're talking about money being put into education, I wondered how we stand with schools like Nunthorpe, and I don't know about the primary, being academies and not in control of the authority, whether we can actually passport that, any of that financial gain onto those schools who probably need it most, but they may not fall within permitted. I don't know whether Claire knows more about this than I do.
I'll allow Claire to come back in if she can answer that.
Yeah, it's something that's come up over the last few years, with obviously a lot more schools going down the academy route than local authority control.
Yeah.
We can have discussions with the academies. We can
Okay.
transfer money. We can put money in towards developments. They can match fund it. There's various ways we can look at doing it. The contribution, as originally was on the 106, was linked to a feasibility study, which would have topped the amount and looked at what schools. The agents have done a deed of variation on section 106 that we're just getting now the full amount. So there'll be no study to define the maximum amount. We're just getting 1.5 million, and it's to be used for education within the borough, so we can determine where that priority lies, whether it's primary capacity in this area, whether it's secondary capacity in the area, whether some of it needs to go to special educational needs developments in the area. And we can look at it as a phase, because we're just getting the money in one check into the council, not as a phase payment. So we can look at whether we spend some in advance now, thinking where kids might go, and then look at maybe spending some of it once the development starts to kick in, to see where the demand and capacity is. So we do have more flexibility with the education money than we did have on the original 106, thanks to the deed of variation. But yeah, we can enter into discussions with academies if that's where they felt the pressure is.
Thanks for that, Claire. And it would be interesting, certainly from my point of view on the committee, to know how that money does progress, because it's not an insignificant amount. Whereas I
can provide those updates, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's not a problem.
thank you. Whereas I tend to agree with Councillor Watts about the extra housing. Given the overall size of the site, I don't think we could claim overdevelopment. And although the heart says do one thing, the head's telling me that in planning terms, we've got to go along, because we tried that the first time round, wasn't successful. It's even less likely to have any success this time round. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to move that we accept the officer's recommendation, but I won't do that just yet. Can I just, before I move it, can I just make the point that we've had a conflict between the planning department at this one. It's going to come back to haunt us a bit. We've had the planning strategy say one set of things and then officers say something else. I think that's going to come back to haunt us somewhat. And I'll move, even though it's unpopular, and I'm probably going to be quite unpopular doing it, we can't justifiably refuse this one, and we have to be responsible. So can I move that we accept the officer's recommendation, Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Foggo.
I'll second Councillor Baldwin's motion.
Okay, thank you. We have two motions, one that is substantiated for approval. Councillor Watts was for rejection. Before I go to the vote, can I clarify that there is no seconder for Councillor Watts?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre.
Having said that, Chair, could I raise a point of explanation again?
No, sorry, Councillor, I'm going to stop you there. But I will ask, Councillor Watts, what was the grounds for refusal?
I repeat overdevelopment because all the previous mentions was the site of 400, and I think this takes us over what is acceptable.
Sorry, Councillor Watts, can you just confirm that that's just overdevelopment of the site?
Yep.
Can I just want to draw members' attention to the fact that we have tried overdevelopment on other sites in Redcar and been unsuccessful for a lot smaller scale development than this with less open space that did open the council up to a costs claim. Just want to highlight that attention to members given the level of open space on this site and the provision of open space surrounding the boundaries. I don't feel that overdevelopment could be justified on appeal, but that's just, my professional opinion as an officer. It's for members to determine which way they want to vote.
Okay, before I seek advice from Emma, Councillor Lockwood, I understand you're back in the room with us.
I am. I'm going to abstain on this, Chair, because I missed the debate.
That's fine. That's what I was going to.
Yeah, but I'm having a problem with my internet. It's back on now. It seems okay. I don't know. It just dropped out. They're probably working on it somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Emma, can I just seek clarification because we've had issues in the past?
You've got your second proposal was seconded. You take that one first.
Okay, so that is for the
recommendation for the officer's recommendation for approval of the planning permission.
Okay, so we're voting for that
yes.
Motion. Okay, so we'll take the first motion, which is for. It was made by Councillor Baldwin, seconded by Councillor Foggo. So you are voting to approve this application. So the first councillor is Councillor Baldwin.
Approved, Chair.
Councillor Watts.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Against, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. I'm next. I'm for. Councillor Ovens.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Head.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Foggo.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. And I believe that is everyone. Okay. Can I ask Liz the vote, please?
Yeah, 5 for and 2 against.
Okay, and then I presume we take the second motion, Emma?
Yeah, just so that it's taken, although it's fallen away anyway.
Right, the second motion was to reject the application. So can you tell me whether yes or no? So I'll start with Councillor Baldwin.
I'm confused by that now, Chair. No, I refuse the second motion.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Councillor Watts.
For.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eyre.
For.
Okay, I'm next. And I'm against. Councillor Ovens?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Head?
Against.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foggo?
Against.
Thank you. Okay. Liz?
Yeah, it's 5-2 again, Chair, in favour of, well, that was no's.
So that has failed. So the original vote for approval has been carried. So to confirm, redesign of layout to planning permission, R 2019-0443, in the erection of 36 additional dwellings of Woodcross Gate, Phase 2, Land of Flats Lane, Normanby, has been approved. Okay, thank you. And can I thank our speakers in attendance this morning in relation to that application. So we'll move on to our second application, which is yes, we've had a request for a comfort break. So can we have, we'll take a 2-minute comfort break. If we can be back as soon as possible, please. I'll resume at 11:20. Thanks, councillors. And I see Councillor Morgan is back with us.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, unfortunately, I missed the end of that. Can I ask what the result was?
It was approved.
Right. Okay.
but you've timed it well in joining us for the second one.
Yeah.
Okay, councillors, can we resume? And our second application is our 2020-0827, erection of 59 dwellings with associated access, landscape and infrastructure land at High Fine Norm B, and the officer's recommendation is approval. Councillor Eyre, do you want to declare that you're ward councillor?
Yes, Chair. Ward councillor there for Normanby.
Okay, thank you. And you come into this with an open mind?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Claire, would you like to give your report on this application?
So hopefully you can see the presentation there with the application site outlined in red. The proposed layout. A street scene elevation from what would be within the development. And then photos showing the end of Skipper's Lane, sort of views up towards the application site from where the access would be. And then views the other way down Skipper's Lane from where the traffic would come. So I'll leave the layout up for members' information. So as the chair said, permission is sought for 59 dwellings with associated access, landscaping and infrastructure. The application relates to land at High Farm. The site is located to the south of the existing High Farm development and to the north of the dwellings on Skipper's Lane and Meadowcross Road. Access to the site would be from Skipper's Lane. The proposal seeks consent for 59 dwellings on a site of 2.2 hectares. The proposed access would be located to the west of the application site. Internally, the main road, as you can see from the plans shown on screen, would be a T-junction with 4 private drive accesses off the main road through the centre of the site. 2 access points, one to the east and one to the west, would provide access through to the remainder of the allocated site to allow for future development, and I'll pick that up in a bit. The dwellings would all be 2-storey with a mix of semi-detached, detached and terrace properties. 7 different house types are proposed to be located throughout the development, and parking would be provided through a mix of driveways and garages. The relevant plans, the plans that have been accompanied with the application are listed on pages 22 and 24 of the report. The relevant policies are listed on page 24 and the top of page 25, and members will see policy H 3.8 talks about Normanby High Farm. The results of the consultation are listed on page 25 onwards, so it's been advertised by means of a press notice, site notice and neighbour notification letters. We've had 135 representations, mainly objecting to the application and raising the comments listed on pages 25 and 26 of the report. Councillors Vince Smith and Chris Gallagher have made comments on the application. They're quoted in full in the report, and both of those members are here to speak today. Northumbrian Water have raised no issues with the application, subject to the use of a condition, and that's listed on page 28. Natural England have got no comments to make. Cleveland Police have made their standard comments in terms of secure by design. Archaeology consultant for the council has reviewed the application and stated no mitigation, or further evaluation is warranted. Development engineers have commented, and their comments are in full on page 29 and 30 of the report. They are raising no objections to the proposal, but I'll pick up comments in terms of the highway section. Local Lead Flood Authority have raised no objections, subject to the use of planning conditions listed on page 30 and 31 of the report. Natural Heritage Manager has made comments, and they're on page 31, as have Environmental Protection in terms of contaminated land and nuisance on pages 32 and 33. The Schools Capital team have made comments on page 33 and 34 of the report, and I'll pick that up in terms of the section 106 requirement. Planning Strategies comments again are in full on pages 34 and 35 of the report. So in terms of the principle of development, the application site is within the development limits and forms part of a housing allocation within the local plan. principle of residential development on the site is therefore considered acceptable, and the proposal would accord with the broad aims of Policy SD3 of the local plan. Policy H2 of the local plan deals with mix and type of housing and the need for a range of criteria, including the need for affordable housing and appropriate mix of house types and sizes. Matters relating to affordable housing I'll pick up in terms of section 106. The application has been submitted by a housing developer who is currently developing a site further north on what is known as High Farm development, which is accessed to the north, sort of opposite Cleveland Retail Park. The developer is therefore aware of the local market needs and demands and has submitted a layout which includes a mix of housing types and size reflecting the market conditions. The layout and mix is considered acceptable and would accord with Policy H2 of the local plan. Turning to Policy H3.8, this is a site allocation for the Normanby High Farm development. The allocation covers a site of 10 hectares for approximately 150 dwellings in total, subject to, as with all policies, a number of criteria. The application site is just over 2 hectares and only covers part of the allocated site. It covers the southern end of the allocated site. So there's land further north which still remains allocated. Criteria B of Policy H3.8 refers to the need of an appropriate designed layout which achieves a logical connection to the existing high farm development, including the extension of footpaths and cycleways. There is nothing in the policy to prevent the site coming forward in stages or as multiple planning applications, providing the criteria is met and the proposal is acceptable in planning terms. The proposed layout, as you can see on the screen, would not prevent development of the wider site, with 2 potential highways connections into the remainder of the allocated site. The layout has been designed to reflect the existing high farm development while allowing for additional development to be provided. However, it is acknowledged the site would appear freestanding until the remainder of the allocated site is completed. This is often the case for larger housing sites completed in phases or by multiple developers. The remainder of the development site, if and when it comes forward, would need to take into account the development in front of you should it be approved in terms of achieving a mix of suitable design and layout. In addition, any additional development would need to ensure it was suitable into highways terms, which may result in latter phases being lower density schemes compared to the current application. And again, a mix of densities on site is often seen on larger sites. It is considered that the proposal accords with the broad principles of the allocation, and the application is therefore compliant with Policy H3.8 of the local plan. The site is isolated in terms of street scene in relationship to existing character areas. The application proposes a mix of house types through the development with a range of detailed design features, including gable build-outs, porches, window designs and bay windows. Details of materials have been provided with the plan submitted with the application. The house types and site layouts are acceptable and would not have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area. The proposal would not have an adverse impact on the street scene and would accord with parts J and K of Policy SD4 of the local plan. Given the location of the site, there are limited residential properties around the site boundary, and as a result, there are no issues in terms of loss of privacy or overlooking to existing residential properties. Within the site, the proposed layout provides adequate separation distances to ensure there are no issues in terms of overlooking or loss of privacy. The residential development would not have a significant adverse impact on occupiers and accords with Part B of Policy SD4 of the local plan. Turning to highways. The application has been accompanied by a transport technical note and travel plan, which has been reviewed by the Council's development engineers. The application proposes development to the south of the existing High Farm residential estate, which is accessed from the trunk road. The proposed development site would be accessed via Skipper's Lane to the south of the application site and would have no vehicle connection to the High Farm development accessed from the trunk road. Skipper's Lane is currently a residential street, providing access to properties on Skipper's Lane and several cul-de-sacs and closes located off Skipper's Lane. The submitted report assesses the impacts of the developments of 160 dwellings, given the allocation in the local plan, rather than the 59 dwellings to which the application relates. However, if the report says 160 is acceptable, well, 59 is going to be acceptable. For the 160 dwellings, the traffic generation predicted is shown on page 37 of the report in the table at the bottom. The report has assessed the junction at Skippers Lane, Ormsby Road, as all the traffic would need to use this junction to access and exit the development. The assessment confirms this junction is able to operate within capacity. Council Development Engineers have reviewed the application and have raised no objections. The internal road layout and parking provisions within the development are acceptable with suitable levels of parking provided. The access is acceptable and the road has the capacity to serve the dwellings proposed. No mitigation is required as part of the development and the junction will continue to operate within capacity. The application therefore has no issues in terms of highway safety and accords with Part P of Policy SD4 of the local plan. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the site is within flood zone 1 and is low risk from a range of flooding. In terms of drainage, the site, several drainage solutions have been considered in accordance with the MPPF. The site is unsuitable for infiltration. However, Spencer Beck is to the west of the site, provides a viable gravity solution for the discharge of to a watercourse. The application has been reviewed by Northumbrian Water and the Council's local lead flood authority, and neither of the consultees have raised objections subject to the use of planning conditions. These conditions are considered reasonable and necessary and would therefore be attached should permission be granted. Subject to the condition, there are no issues in terms of flood risk and drainage, and the application accords with Policy SD7 of the local plan. In terms of ecology, a preliminary ecology appraisal has been submitted with the application. Given the location, there are no impact on local designated sites. The site comprises grassland and scrub, which is largely unmanaged and has become overgrown. In terms of protected species, the report's looked at a number of protected species and those comments are included in the report on page 39. The impacts as a result of the development are listed on page 39, as well as the proposed mitigation, all of which is considered acceptable. Subject to this mitigation, the proposal would not have any adverse impacts in terms of ecology, and a condition is recommended to ensure the mitigation is provided on site. In terms of contamination and nuisance, the proposed development site would be accessed by existing residential properties who could be affected by construction activities. It's accepted that this will be short-term disturbance. However, conditions are recommended in relation to construction hours and a construction environmental management plan. In terms of contamination, and geo-environmental site investigation has been submitted with the application, and colleagues in environmental protection have recommended the use of an unexpected contaminated land condition, given that the report doesn't highlight any contaminated land issues, but we just put a standard condition on in case of anything unexpected. Subject to the conditions, the application raises no issues in terms of parts B, E and N of Policy SD4 of the local plan. In terms of section 106s, the submitted plans show no affordable dwellings and the submitted documentation confirms there would be no affordable units provided on site. The site is within the Greater Eston North Housing Market sub-area, identified in the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. Within this area, there is already an over-provision of affordable units, and as a result, the need is for market housing to address the shortfall and the over-provision of affordable units. The agents have indicated this is no affordables to be provided on a viability argument. However, this is not the case, and given the location, there is no requirement for affordable. The application therefore accords with Policy H4 of the local plan. As with the previous application, the application site's within 6 kilometres of the SPA and Ramsar site at Corton. As members are aware, Policy N4 talks about net increase in dwellings within 6 kilometres. Section 106 is therefore recommended to secure an SPA contribution. The application has been reviewed by a Schools Capital Officer in relation to the impacts on schools within the area. The evidence provides that there is sufficient primary school capacity in the area for the numbers of pupils the development is likely to generate. However, there is likely pressure on secondary provision and the provision of SEND places within the borough, and as such they have requested a contribution in terms of secondary provision and special educational needs. The MPPF states that development should not be unduly burdened with financial obligations to levels which would result in developments becoming unviable. The agents have submitted information in relation to the economic viability of the site for the council to review, as they believe the amount requested in terms of education contributions would make the scheme unviable. The final amount for education contribution is therefore to be confirmed based on the economic appraisal and the viability of the site. Based on this, the application is considered acceptable, with the financial contribution relating to education to be finalised based on the economic viability assessment. The application raises no issues in terms of crime prevention or in terms of archaeology. Subject to everything I've said, the report is recommended for approval, subject to Section 106, securing financial contribution to education to be agreed, and the financial contribution to the Recreation Management Plan, and the conditions listed on pages 43, 44 and 45 and 46 of the report, subject to an extra condition that has been missed off the report in terms of just linking it back to the mitigation proposed in terms of ecology. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Opportunity now for queries or questions in relation to Claire's report from councillors. And our first one is from Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. Claire, the Natural Heritage Manager, mentions the removal of trees and replacement with similar numbers or more. Is that covered in condition 2, or would that have to be conditioned on its own?
We could add an extra condition, however, there's no landscaping proposed within the application site, given that it's only a small area. The application is bound by a landscaping scheme from the original High Farm development, and there's sufficient landscaping in the area. So there would be no places on site within the application site to allow for it, but it's something we could pick up on further phases of development if members wanted to.
Sorry, Chair, can I just confirm that, yes, I would like that. I know we're not in discussion, but yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Eyre.
Thanks, Chair. Claire, I may have overlooked it in the report. Who owns the land?
I believe the land is owned by Mr. Collins, but as members are aware, land ownership's not a planning consideration.
No, I know that. I just want to know who owns the land. Is it still the Collins family?
As I understand it, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Claire.
Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to a previous question, I am worried that when it talks of flood risk and drainage, Spencer Beck to the west of the site presents a viable gravity solution for discharge of a watercourse. And then in the section 3, condition 3, it says that the drainage scheme will ensure foul flows discharged to the combined sewer, blah, 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 and ensure the surface water discharges to the existing watercourse. If this is the first part of a continued development, I'm not happy about surface water being discharged into the local beck for the effect it has on the ecology.
So in terms of drainage, there's a hierarchy that developers have to look at for sustainable drainage solutions. So your first step is usually infiltration. Around here with the clay subsoil we have, infiltration doesn't really work. The second option is to look at discharge into a watercourse. Now that's regulated. It's not just you can chuck any old water into it at any old rate. So there are further conditions proposed on the report, which, sorry, just let me double check which conditions they are. Conditions 6, 7 and 8 would deal with surface water drainage, and they would look at discharge rates, where it discharges into the beck, and they'd need an agreement to discharge into that watercourse separately outside of planning permission anyway. Northumbrian Water, if those two options fail, we'll look at taking surface water if there's no other viable solution in terms of suds drainage and sustainable drainage. But in this instance, Northumbrian Water will be taking the foul, and there'll be a discharge into the watercourse for surface water drainage, subject to all the conditions. Any later phases would assess those on its own merits to make sure there's still capacity in the watercourse, and would be subject to their own drainage assessments and drainage conditions if necessary.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, a few questions for you. the development further north, High Farm side of it, the paper talks about the approval for, well, talks about 160 dwellings. This one's for 59, so obviously they're looking to do more building further north. Is there any way that we can stipulate that the two sites should never have a highway going directly through it, so that it becomes a rat run? The other question I've got is about affordable housing. Again, because there is a good possibility of further development north of this one, they're saying that it's not viable to have affordable housing, but anything I think is over 15 houses, then we're supposed to have affordable housing. And if they don't provide it, then usually they make a contribution for affordable housing to be provided elsewhere in the borough. Have we asked for this contribution at all? Thank you. So
picking up on those, the 160 dwellings, the site's allocated for 150. Which is where sort of the 160 comes for in terms of transport assessment. In terms of the road layout and connections, they would be reviewed as an application comes forward to whether or not highways say it would be acceptable. The policy talks about access from Skippers Lane and providing footpath connections into High Farm to the north, no vehicle access. And I believe the High Farm junction coming out to the north on the trunk road, so sort of the northern end near Cleveland Retail Park, has been designed for a capacity at that junction. So we'd have to make assessments if an application came in to connect those, whether it could be achieved through highways. We couldn't condition it on this application because it's outside the red edge and it's not what's being asked for, but it's something we would review to make sure that junction capacities worked and that development was acceptable. In terms of affordable, the applicants put in initially that no affordable would be provided on site for viability arguments. When we've reviewed the application, it's within the Greater North housing market area, and therefore, based on the strategic housing market assessment, there is no need for affordable in this area, regardless of a viability argument. So even if the developers hadn't put that argument in, we wouldn't be asking for any affordable housing contribution, whether it be on-site or financial off-site, because there's no demand in the Greater Western North. There's an over-provision of affordable in this area. So yes, the policy in the local plan does talk about, in the main, any developments of more than 15 dwellings providing affordable, but it's got to be linked back to the housing market assessment and whether there is a need for it. In this area of the borough, there is no need for affordable housing. The need is for market housing to readdress the balance, and that's why we haven't asked for it. It's not a viability argument. It's based on policy that we haven't asked for affordable. So no, in answer to your question, no, there's no on-site and there's no off-site provision for affordable.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foggo. Claire, would you just bring up the outline planning area for the whole 150? And I think it shows the application site we're looking at today. That's the one. So I take it, looking from the left, the red area is the 150.
So just to explain, so at the south, just off the plan, you've got existing Skippers Lane and this is Meadowcroft Avenue. So this is the existing housing estate where the access would come from. You've then got the application site where the 59 dwellings would be built in this sort of rectangular area. The further allocation site is to the north, which the allocation site's bigger than the application site. And then you've got the existing High Farm development that's accessed off the trunk road right to the north. The red edge runs like this and has sort of this extension to connect into the watercourse for where the drainage would be. So all that needs to be within the application site so we can condition it and control it, which is why you've sort of got this weird dogleg. It's not an access route, it's a connection to the watercourse.
Thank you, that clarifies that. I thought the red large area to the left was the actual whole site.
No, the allocated area is to the north of sort of this rectangle offshoot. So it's if you can see my mouse sort of moving round, that's the rest of the allocated site.
Okay, because I was thinking it was a small area we're looking at today for such a big area for
This area for 59 that we're looking at.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Do we have any other queries or questions for Claire on her report before I move on to our speakers? We don't seem to, so I'll move on to our speakers for this application this morning. And our first one is Mr. Steve Appleyard. Good morning, Mr. Appleyard. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Can you just speak up a little bit, if that's possible?
Certainly, I can hear you. Is that better?
That's a lot better. Thank you very much indeed. And you're objecting to this application. Can I just point out before you start that you have 3 minutes to give your comments in relation to it, and the time will start from when you start speaking. So go ahead in your own time.
When permission for the current site almost completed was granted, the farm plus 150k was rejected by the developer to the community. This was to allay fears that future developments would follow eating up that green wedge between.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Mr. Appleyard. Mr. Appleyard.
Hang on, Steve.
Mr. Appleyard, we're having difficulties in making out what you're saying. You're fading in and out. Could we probably try and reconnect with Mr. Appleyard, and I'll come back to him and move on to our next speaker, Mr. Roper.
We're having difficulties in making out what you're saying when we face
Everything's got it on in the background.
Mr. Roper, can you hear me? Bear with us, councillors. It seems to be a theme this morning.
John?
Right. I'll start with Mr. Appleyard again. Mr. Appleyard.
Hold on a minute, Chair, please.
Okay, will do.
Off you go.
Mr. Appleyard, are you there?
Mute your computer, please, Steve.
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
That sounds a lot better. So go ahead, speak clearly as much as you can. You have 3 minutes to make your comments. Go ahead.
When permission for the current site almost completed was granted, the remainder of the farm plus 150k was to be given by the developer to the community. This was to allay fears that future developments would follow, eating up the last green wedge between Exton and Middlesbrough. To facilitate building work on the current site, our bridleway was closed for 5 years and only reopened 2 years ago. If future developments are allowed, they will have a similar effect, again denying access to many footpaths and land for decades. We intend to use the roadway as vehicle access and then thereafter for residential use. At a public meeting in 2004, the then borough engineer gave his professional opinion that the lane and sight lines onto the B1380 were not adequate for present traffic volumes, far less any increase. flooding. High Farm has two major becks running south to north through the river, and these becks coupled with natural absorption provide a natural floodplain for surrounding properties and parkland. Floods often made worse by the current development and can be only exacerbated by further building. Security. Presently, a security barrier erected and maintained by Redcar Council between my garage at 2 minutes and Smithstock Park perimeter fence, which goes a long way to prevent antisocial behaviour with vehicles to access and through the farmlands. Once removed, no similar point exists for replacement, laying the land wide open to. The land was never considered by the council as suitable for residential building. High Farm, coupled with the neighbouring Spencerbeck Farm, being the last underdeveloped land between Eston and Middlesbrough. In the council's description, wedge. Over 4 decades, this land has remained virtually untouched, having quite naturally grown and developed into an oasis of flora and fauna of myriad types. If allowed, it will continue and remain a unique resort to visit and enjoy for our community and beyond. Planning fatigue. Since 1989, more than 5 planning applications for this land have been denied, 2 of which went to the Secretary of State. When the current site was permitted, we were assured that this was not the thin end of the wedge, leading to more and more building until every blade of grass was covered with concrete or tarmac. Well, here we are again, another building proposal, a sign of our town forest. And the council thinks that in the teeth of the worst pandemic in 100 years, nearly more than 2 weeks' notice for the community is sufficient in light of the history concerning this farm, a very poor show. I submit my strongest opposition to this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Appleyard. Remain on the phone, please. We did have difficulties at times in making out what you were saying, and to be fair to you, we have. I understand your written the comments you've just stated. So Claire is going to read them out so we can fully understand your objection. So bear with us, please.
Yeah, thank you.
The phone, please. We did have difficulties.
Before I start, Lynn, can you just mute yourself, please, so we don't get the bounce back? Thank you. So just to reread the speech, when permission for the current site, almost completed, was granted, the remainder of the farm plus 150k was to be gifted to the developer to the community. This was to allay fears that future developments would follow, eating up the last green wedge between Eston and Middlesbrough. To facilitate building work on the current site, our bridleway was closed for 5 years and only reopened 2 years ago. If future developments are allowed, they will have a similar effect, again denying access to the many footpaths that have crisscrossed this land for decades. The proposal intends to use Skipper's Lane, the roadway, as vehicle access for construction and thereafter for residential use. At a public meeting in 2004, the borough engineer gave his professional opinion that the land and sight lines onto the B1380 were not adequate for present traffic volumes, far less any increase. Flooding. High Farm has two major becks running south and north towards the river, and these becks, coupled with natural absorption, provide a natural floodplain for surrounding properties and parklands. The farmland floods often, made worse by the current developments, and can only be exacerbated by further building. Security. Presently, a security barrier erected and maintained by Redcar and Cleveland Council between the garage at 2 Meadowcroft Road and Smithstock Park perimeter fence, which goes a long way to prevent antisocial behaviour with vehicle access on and through the farmlands. Once removed, no similar point exists for a replacement, laying the land wide open to such activity. Planning. Historically, the land was never considered by the council as suitable for residential building. High Farm, coupled with the neighbouring Spencerbeck Farm, being the last underdeveloped land between Eston and Middlesbrough, creating, in the council's own description, a green wedge, something to be preserved. Environmental. Over 4 decades, this land has remained virtually untouched, having quite naturally grown and developed into an oasis of flora and fauna of various types. If allowed, it will continue and remain a unique resource to visit, traverse and enjoy for our community and beyond. Fatigue. Since 1989, more than 5 planning applications concerning this land have been denied, 2 of which went to the Secretary of State. When the current site was permitted, we were assured that this was not the thin end of the wedge leading to more and more building until every blade of grass was covered with concrete or tarmac. Well, here we are again, another building proposal. Still no sign of our town forest, and a council who thinks that in the worst pandemic in 100 years, that barely more than 2 weeks' notice with the community is sufficient. In light of the history concerning this farm, a very poor show. I submit my strongest opposition to this proposal.
Thank you, Claire. I hope you could hear that, Mr. Appleyard.
I did, thank you.
Okay, smashing. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr. Appleyard in relation to his comments? I have one. Mr. Appleyard, what address, what street do you reside at?
2 Meadowcroft Road and the very closest dwelling to the proposed site.
Okay, you mentioned in your comments that in 2004 you alleged that a highway officer said that traffic would obviously not take or be able to use the junction. Which junction is this?
This is the T junction at Skippers Lane onto the 1380 Ormsby Road.
And since 2004, has there been any work done on that junction?
No, the only improvement was a bus lay-by to the junction.
And is that on the B Road or?
That's on 380 Ormsby Road.
Okay, thank you. Do any other councillors have any questions for Mr. Appleyard? No, we don't seem to. Thank you, Mr. Appleyard, and I apologise for the IT issues we've had. We'll now move on to Mr. John Roper. Are you there, Mr. Roper?
I think we just need to.
Okay, bear with us, councillors. We've got to make contact with Mr. Roper. Okay. Mr. Roper, are you there?
Hello.
Yes, he's there, Chair.
Thanks, Lynn. Mr. Roper, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we may have the same issues we had with Mr. Appleyard, but go ahead. You have 3 minutes to give your views. I understand you're objecting to this application. If we can't make out what you are saying, I'll again ask Claire to read out your comments. So go ahead in your own time.
Mainly, it's the access that's a serious concern to myself and other residents. The houses that are proposed, the 59, could lead to possibly 100 more extra vehicles using Skippers Lane, which on a weekend at the moment is overladen with traffic through the junior football. We tend to put up with that and endure that for the 2 days a week, but to put up with that for 7 days a week would cause serious disturbance and disruption to present residents, as well as being of detriment to the safety and environment, air quality, noise, etc. Listening earlier about the Flats Lane planning, Skippers Lane is far smaller than Flats Lane, yet the same number of houses seem to be built or extended onto that site. That's my serious concern. The traffic, the safety of kids and the many OAPs who live on the Skippers Lane estate. I object strongly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roper. You were loud and clear. That was lovely. Thank you. Do we have any questions in relation to Mr. Roper's comments from councillors? Okay, we don't. Thank you very much, Mr. Roper. That's it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker, and we're now turning to our ward councillors, and the first one is Councillor Gallagher again. Good afternoon. We're just into the afternoon now. Again, can I just,
thank you, Chair.
I'll just inform you, I have 3 minutes to give your views on this application, and the time will start from when you start speaking. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to take issue with the validation from the planning officer regarding policy H3, table 2, and subparagraph H3.8, where she states 150 houses could be accommodated. The validity of this chart is laughable. Nowhere in this chart does it show the 436 houses we approved this morning to be built on Flats Lane, and yet we're still talking in terms of 150 houses for this area, which clearly is well in excess of our needs. When the local plan was adopted and stated, intention of this land was to form a green wedge that was to be planted to become a woodland for the area and to provide space for the natural world to prosper and grow. Yet slowly the development to the north adjoining the trunk road has grown and moved south towards this location under consideration. We still await the planting of the wood. We're in a situation within Redcar and Cleveland are providing more housing than called for by the government's directives, and therefore do not need to build more homes to meet demand, as there is sufficient capacity in terrain to meet our needs. Therefore, this development, I feel, is inappropriate, as there is no need and will generate traffic issues onto the High Street, Ormsby Road, as mentioned earlier. But anyone having to enter and egress from Skippers Lane currently can testify. The problems are getting worse, and with each passing day, the potential becomes more and more difficult. Give me a second, please. The IT issue. The problems are getting worse each passing day, and potential ingress traffic movements created by this development onto this access point will add exponentially to the problem. These problems do not consider the turmoil generated by the construction traffic in the building of these properties and the noise and mess that comes with any building process. As with all the services provided, any additional need becomes more and more difficult to service, and that is true of education and health, which is running at capacity in this case, the education and beyond capacity in the case of the GP provision. For all those that live in this area will realise the difficulty of seeing a doctor at this time or in the future, all of which cannot be dealt with quickly. This development is in an adjacent ward, but all traffic will enter my ward and affect the lives of my residents. I therefore request that this development be rejected due to these issues and the lack of need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Do I have any questions from councillors? We don't seem to. So thank you for your attendance and giving your views on that application. Our second councillor this morning is Councillor Vince Smith.
Hi, Chair.
Good afternoon, Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon. Thanks.
You have 3 minutes to give your views on this application, and the time will start from when you start speaking. Go ahead in your own time.
The importance of green space has been highlighted during the COVID epidemic as an essential means of health and well-being. As a council, we need to recognise this and protect the green areas we have. As former Councillor Sheila Clark points out in her objection letter, the people of this part of the borough voted green space as their main priority in the love it, hate it consultation, which was undertaken prior to the local plan being formulated. This, however, seems to have carried no weight in this land being set aside for more housing on land previously protected as a green wedge and a proposed community woodland, as mentioned in paragraph 6.8 on page 137. The local plan predates the epidemic, but it should be adaptable to take into consideration the unprecedented changes we face in what is termed the new normal. Even without the intended community woodland, this former farmland has been reclaimed by nature and supports a wide variety of birds and other wildlife, as commented on by objectors. As a council, do we not have a responsibility to retain valuable green spaces as much as possible for future generations to enjoy and to help combat climate change? As I stated in my objection, I also have great concern over the impact of these 59 homes being granted, with the resulting construction traffic using Skippers Lane and the junction with the B1380, neither of which are capable of handling this level of increase. These 59 homes are just the tip of the iceberg, as in total 150 homes are planned to eventually use this route. Most households now have at least 2 cars, and if even half of these homes have 3, that is an extra 375 cars coming and going every day, on top of the several years of construction traffic. All of this onto a narrow residential street. It will cause further strain at Normby Top Junction, which is already regularly over capacity at peak times. This is even before the cumulative effect caused by the new 400 plus house at Flats Lane, which we just discussed earlier. The traffic report submitted with the application was based on a survey undertaken during lockdown. It does not give a true picture of the impact it will cause. The application as it stands is also a contradiction of policy H3.8b, as a council's own planning strategy officer has reported, and should be refused for these reasons if nothing else. The council needs to meet government targets in allowing new housing, but the 400 plus at Flats Lane granted on appeal means the council is well in excess of meeting those targets. These extraordinary times present a precious chance to reset our course, to build back better and to address properly the climate, nature and wellbeing crisis we were already facing before COVID-19 arrived. I therefore ask that the committee reject the application and adhere to its previous commitment to keep it as community woodland.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Okay, do you have any questions?
Can I just ask some clarification?
No, sorry, Councillor Smith, you can't. You're allowed to give you 3 minutes comments on the application, but there's no further dialogue unless the councillors have questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions from councillors in relation to Councillor Smith's comments? Okay, we don't. Thank you for giving your views on this application, Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll move on to our final speaker this afternoon in relation to this application, and it's Ian Prescott, who is the agent in relation to this application. Good morning, sorry, good afternoon, Mr. Prescott.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Can I just point out you have 3 minutes to give your comments in relation to this application, and the time will start from when you start speaking. So go ahead in your own time.
Right, thanks very much. Land and Partnerships Director at Keepmoors. You may be aware that we carried out a consultation exercise at the turn of the year on this scheme to gauge public response to it. Vast majority of people who responded were simply against the principle of development. But as you've heard from the officer, the principle of development was established in the local plan back in May 2018 before Keepmoor got involved. So the principle of development is established. The other big issue that was raised was highways and concerns about traffic. As you'll see in the report, we've actually done a traffic assessment based on 160 dwellings. Whilst the landowner at the minute is only willing to release for sale the land that we've submitted for planning, the landowner was very keen that in bringing forward the scheme for 59 dwellings, that we didn't do anything that would hinder the development of further phases of land. So the traffic assessment was all done on 160, and you've heard from the officer that the engineers are happy that the 59 proposed are acceptable. So the principle of highway traffic is established. There's some comment in the report from the strategy officer suggesting that the development should be built from the north and that building from the south is premature. Can I just highlight that there is to be no link road through the High Farm development. The northern section had a limit, and we're close to the number that can be built off the northern section. So the access to the site, the overall site now, has to come in from the south. The top priority for Keep Moat is health and safety, and proper planning of this site from a build point of view. We need to be building the houses nearest the entrance to the site first, so that as we build the site, residents have easy access into their dwellings. They're not accessing their dwellings through a building site. So if we were to put a long road in to the northern section, we'd have 100 people passing through a construction site to get out to this site. So it's critically important that we start building at the southern end. Lastly, I would say what we're hoping to do is keep the site team that are there. We've got 60 people on site. They're all local people. We're using local contractors. We've got a site manager and assistant site manager who live locally at Boosbeck and Skelton.
3 minutes, Chair.
Our aim is to retain
Mr. Prescott.
on site.
Mr. Prescott, I've got to stop you there. Sorry, you've had your
That's
3
fine.
minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions from councillors, and we have one from Councillor Eyre.
No, it's okay, Chair. The speaker there has answered my question.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Do we have any further questions from councillors for Mr. Prescott? We don't appear to, so thank you, Mr. Prescott, for giving your views and comments on this application. Appreciated. Okay, we move on, and do we have any questions or queries for Claire before I open it up for debate? Okay, we don't seem to, so I will open. Oh, Councillor Watts, is this the debate or is it a query?
It's a query. Sorry, I was having trouble with my mouse. Yeah, question for Claire. We've heard from the speakers that there were promised vegetation and woodland, and now we're being told, well, the plan, you can't have that. You mentioned hedgehogs briefly in here. I don't hear anything about hedgehog highways. We've had one accepted. I'm just questioning whether this council is actually in favour. This particular development, I'm raising it now because I would hate to come in later on and say, oh, this principle's already been passed, you know. But it strikes me, if this is being put in the middle of a wildlife area, it needs hedgehog highways. And has a proper survey been carried out by this council under the hedgehog highway scheme been carried out?
In terms of the woodland, the application for the original High Farm site sought section 106, which dealt with woodland provision. Now, some of that will still be provided to the west of this application site. There'll still be an area of landscape buffer alongside the beck, which will continue to be provided. That's outside of the allocation within the local plan, and it's outside of this application site. In terms of hedgehogs, they were included in the ecology appraisal, which has been submitted by the applicant and reviewed by the council, and a range of mitigation is proposed. As I said, that condition's been missed off the report, so I did recommend to members that it was the conditions in the report plus a condition about the mitigation in the ecology report to be. So the condition would read that the ecology mitigation outlined in the ecology report submitted on whichever date shall be adhered to for the lifetime of development. We can expand that condition to include the provision of hedgehog highways.
Thank you, Claire.
Any other queries before I move on to open it up for debate? Okay, we don't. So I will open up for debate for councillors. Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's a number of points. First of all, going through the consultation period, my telephone and my emails were inundated there from residents on the Skippers Lane, Smith Dock area due to the lack of consultation and notices there from Redcar Cleveland Borough Council. I toured the area on that estate, and I only found one notice regarding the proposed application, and that was on a lamppost just before the debatable access there to the estate at the end of Skippers Lane. Moving on to say the question of social housing, affordable housing. Again, it's my opinion and comment. It's not private housing, and I've spoke about this before at planning meeting. It's not private and affordable housing that we're short of. And while we're on about affordable, when you do the calculation, it's affordable to whom? It is social rented housing that our borough is seriously short of. Moving on to the objection, speaking on the objection, I can only support what the two councillors have raised, plus the fact the access there to the estate via Skippers Lane. I can go back something like 25 years when the first application for building on this land was made. And the main objection, as it is now, was access via the end of Skippers Lane. I can make the comment there that the landowner there was, if we don't get their permission, I'll turn it into a pig farm. However, not for reporting. One of my reasons is objecting there to the access along there with the impracticality and the problems it will cause residents on the Smith Dock estate. I don't know how many of the committee members have driven into this estate from the trunk road. It's like a rabbit warren. There's one major road going through, and all of a sudden it comes to it's not a main road. It's a maze of little roads, and I can see why the developer wants to put access there the Smith Dock through where he wants to put it now there at the end of Skippers Lane. Why not build another road there surrounding the existing houses which are there for access there to the proposed housing development. In practice, Chair, I have no problem with the proposed extra houses being built. It's supporting, and my own opinion, it's the access to the housing development. As been said before, on Skipper's Lane, it's a narrow road. There's only one road running alongside of the estate. The estate's on the left-hand side as you go along the lane. As has been said, weekends and the sport activities that take place on the Smith Dock Park itself, it exacerbates the road usage. So the residents have no complaints about the sporting activities that take place there on a weekend. But it's the parking. It's the way that the park and block entrances there to residents' houses. If they remove, I would ask there that the developer reconsiders the access to the proposed housing estate. And I'm sure if they did, it would be more acceptable to the residents and maybe there to those who have made their objections clear. I think it would be more acceptable to them. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishes to join the debate? Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. Similar to the last proposal, I don't think there's a justifiable reason that we can stand up in front of appeal and say we could reject it for that reason. If no one comes forward, I'll move something, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Baldwin. Yeah, I'll make a comment. We've got to realise, Councillor, that this is allocated land within the local plan, and that's what we would be taking to the appeal judge if we refused it. We've already allocated this area for development, which complies with SD3. It's within development limits. And the development would not create no loss of privacy or overlooking established dwellings. It's well away from the established buildings and dwellings, and it wouldn't have any adverse impact on the street scene. And I know there is an issue in relation to, or we believe there's an issue with access, but the evidence has been provided that this new development will take that capacity. So I believe that or my opinion is, I will be voting for this application. Councillor Ovens.
If that was a proposal to accept this, I would second that. I think at the moment we're just looking at this smaller development, and we have to take an application as it comes in, and we would find it hard to dispute it. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to make comment? Okay, can I have a motion then, please? Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. Just because I want to make myself even more unpopular today, apparently. I'll move the officer's recommendation to approve, please.
And I'll second.
With the conditions already stated?
Yes, Chair, including the, I don't know if we decided it could be a condition on the trees to be placed later on. Also.
Claire?
I can't condition the trees for later phases because they're outside the application site. I did recommend the use of an additional condition in terms of ecology, if members are happy to accept that, but the trees would need to pick up as layouts evolve on further applications rather than as a condition.
Okay, do we have any other motions? Okay, I will then take the vote, which was a motion by Councillor Baldwin, seconded by Councillor Ovens. And I will start with Councillor Eyre.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Head.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lockwood.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ovens.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baldwin.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Foggo.
Approved, Chair.
Okay, and I'm last and I approve. Votes list, please.
84, 1 against.
Thank you. So, erection of 59 dwellings with associated access and landscaping and infrastructure land at High Farm Normanby has been approved. Thank you. And can I thank our speakers who have attended today and given their views on this application. Thank you. So we'll move on to our third application this afternoon, and it is our 2021-0106 external chiller and laundrette at sides and replacement coal bunkers at front, the Cooperative's Saltburn Service Station, Mask Road, Saltburn, and the officer's recommendation is approval. And can I declare it is my ward, and I sit on with an open mind and have not discussed this application with anyone. Claire, your report, please.
So you should see on the screen the application site outlined in red. Just a bit clearer for members. And then you've got the front and side elevations, both existing and proposed. So you can see on this side elevation to Ox Close, this is the laundrette unit we're talking about. The coal bunkers are replacement ones at the front, and a chiller unit at the other side elevation. We've then got the rear elevation and the remaining side elevation. So again, you'll see the side of the laundrette and the chiller unit with a concrete base unit. And then just some photos showing. So the laundrette unit would be on this elevation behind the totem sign. And then the chiller units would be on that side elevation that you can see in the photo there. In that location behind the wall would be the chiller units. And the view from down the street, so you can see the side elevation where the chiller units are going. So I'll leave that up, but if you want me to swing back to any of the plans, let me know, and just to run through the report. So permission is sought for an external chiller and laundrette at side and replacement coal bunkers to the front. The application relates to the Cooperative Saltburn Service Station, Mask Road, Saltburn. As members are aware, the application site is an existing commercial business located in a predominantly residential area. The site is accessed to the north via the existing road network, with residential dwellings to the east, south and west. The laundrette unit would be located on the north of the site, with the chiller units located to the south. The core bunkers would replace existing bunkers to the front elevation of the the building. The laundrette unit would be 1.5 metres deep, 3.15 metres wide and 3 metres high. The chiller unit would be 5.4 metres in length and 2 metres deep at the deepest point. As you'll have seen from the photos, it does narrow that side, and would infill the existing space between the building and the boundary fence. The relevant policies are listed on page 48 of the report, and as a result of the consultation, we've received 23 representations, all included on page 48 of the report. Saltburn, Mask and Newmass Parish Council have approved the application, and Councillor Thompson, as ward member, has made comments which are quoted in full on pages 48 and 49 of the report. In terms of contaminated land, comments have been received from the Contaminated Land Officer that the applicant's attention be drawn to the risk of contaminants in, on or under the site as an informative. And in terms of nuisance, they've recommended the use of a planning condition in terms of noise from the site shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority for the control of noise. I'll just pause because I think someone's phone is ringing and they're not on mute. Right, there we go. In terms of the considerations then of planning issues, the application site is within the development limits and is linked to the existing commercial shop petrol filling station. The principle of works in this location is acceptable and would accord with the aims of policy SD3 of the local plan. There are mainly residential uses surrounding the petrol station shop. And the petrol station shop is set back from Mass Road by a wide grass verge and the access road to the existing business. The chiller units are set to the south of the existing building and would be largely screened by the existing fencing surrounding the site. The part of the unit projecting above the fence would still be lower than the existing shop building, and therefore these units would not have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area. The laundrette units would be located on the northern end of the building and would face Mask Road. This unit would be viewed against the existing shop building and would be lower than the eaves level of the building. As you will have seen from the photos, there are already a range of structures and adverts on the side elevation of the building where the laundrette unit is proposed, including the Amazon lockers and a large totem sign. Given the size of the laundrette unit, the location against the existing building, the existing structures and adverts already in place, and the existing grass verge and setback from Mask Road, it's not considered that these laundrette units would have an adverse impact on the street scene. The replacement coal bunkers to the front would be replacing existing structures and would not impact on the street scene. The proposal therefore is considered suitable in relation to the street scene and character of the site and surroundings, and accords with Part J of Policy SD4 of the local plan. In terms of impacts on neighbours, the application site is located in a predominantly residential area, although we acknowledge there is activity associated with the existing commercial shop and petrol filling station. These businesses generate a level of activity in the area in terms of noise and vehicle movements. Given the operation of the business, there are a range of noise producing equipment on the site, in the form of car wash, petrol pumps and existing chilling and refrigeration units. The proposed chiller units are located to the south of the commercial building, along the boundary with the existing residential properties. There are existing fences between the properties and the building. The Environmental Protection Team have reviewed the application and have raised no objections to the proposal in relation to noise and disturbance, subject to the use of a planning condition. The condition is considered reasonable and necessary and should be added should permission be granted. Given the nature of the application, there are no issues in terms of overlooking or loss of privacy. The proposal would not have a significant adverse impact on amenity of existing occupiers, and the proposal accords with Part B of Policy SD4 of the local plan. The works proposed do not impact on the access egress to the site and the garage and do not impact on parking provision. The laundrette unit is set against the existing building and does not project beyond the existing rear wall, and therefore the positioning will not impact on visibility when exiting the site. The application raises no issues in terms of highway safety or crime prevention, and for these reasons the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions on pages 52 and 53 of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Claire. Queries for Claire in relation to a report, and Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick query. This coal unit bunker, I don't understand why this is being, is it replaced and getting rid of coal? Or is it just to get a better place to store coal? Because under our climate change strategy, coal is being phased out.
They're called coal bunks. If I put the elevation up, you'll see. If I just, so it's existing, what they call coal bunkers, existing storage boxes to the front of the building. It's not necessarily for storing of coal, it's for storing of other things you see in front of petrol stations. So barbecue equipment in the summer, salt in the winter for us. They're just called coal bunkers, but yeah, it's not coal as coal is stored in it.
Thank you, Claire. I was getting a bit worried there.
Claire, I am aware of cooler mounted on the building. Where are they at the moment? Do you know?
Sorry, what's already mounted on it?
The actual refrigeration fans. That's the word I wanted.
So as you can see from these elevations, there's various equipment all over the building. So there's some equipment at the front of the building. There's equipment existing on the sides elevations of the building, and on that plant there's already some fans and refrigeration units on the rear of the building. It's an external chiller that's been proposed in the existing, well, it's been proposed in the existing opening to the south of the building.
Okay. And in relation to the laundrette, it's quite an unusual request. Have we ever had one in the borough before?
I'm not aware of any in the borough that we've got or we've had applications for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. Claire, the drawing you got up there, the middle picture, it shows the chiller higher than the fence in front of it. Do we know if that height? Do you know if the height of the chiller is higher than the fence to the adjoining property or not?
So yes, the chiller unit's higher than the existing fences around the boundary, both the fence at the rear, front and side. It does project over those boundaries.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any other queries or questions for Claire in relation to a report? Okay, we don't seem to, so we'll move on to our speaker in relation to this application. Oh, Councillor Ovens, maybe you just come in.
Yes, sorry, it wouldn't take my cue. I held my hand up. Would the new chiller facility, would that do away with any of the other bits and pieces? Is that what you, if that was what you were implying, it might improve the appearance of the place, or is it just a purely sort of functional thing?
It's an additional chiller unit, so there's a bit of relocation of existing satellite dishes, but all the existing bits and pieces on the building would remain.
Okay, and I find it it would be difficult to give any other images, but it's very difficult to imagine what the laundrette would look like, and it doesn't seem very big.
If I've shared this
elevator, comparable to a shop size, Claire.
No, it's a small unit located on the side. So if we look at this elevation at the bottom of the plan I'm showing, you've got the existing Amazon lockers, which you will have seen in the photo. And then this is the laundrette that's going on there. So it's three basically big washing machines on the side of the building, I think is the best way I can describe it to you without showing a photo.
Right. So would there be room for the users to go in there, or what? I can't
No,
quite see.
You don't go in. It's not a building.
You don't go in.
No,
that's what I was wondering.
No,
yeah.
You would stand on the grass verge and put your washing in and switch it on.
That bottom
it's not a building.
image, the bottom image, unfortunately, on my screen, all I'm getting is the roof.
I don't know if you can see on this elevation, it's building that sort of projects at the side. So it's not it's not a sort of room, it's not a building in its own right. It's just, for example, at Redcar Morrison's, you've got the lockers where you can have parcels delivered. It's that sort of bolt-on on the end of it. It's not a separate room or building in its own right.
Right, okay, that's helpful. And I think outside the front, if I remember from visiting occasionally, it's things like the newspapers and that they have on display.
Yes, that's correct. They've got a range of facilities at the front where you know, you start your seasonal equipment or you have the newspapers. All right. Okay, if people want to go and stand there, watch the wash and go around, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Claire, as regarding noise, which comes under the environmental protection nuisance, has there been any information as regarding the noise coming from the machinery on the proposed application?
Not submitted with the application, but colleagues in Environmental Protection have recommended the use of a planning condition, which we've included in the report and as attached to our recommendation, that would agree details of noise levels and any mitigation that would be required, and that would need to be installed on site prior to the chiller units. There is no objection subject to the use of that planning condition, and are not asking for the information in advance of a decision being made.
I'll comment on that later, Chair. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Councillor Eyre. Any other queries or questions for Claire before I try again with our speaker? No, we don't. So our one and only speaker on this application is the Ward Councillor, Councillor Philip Thompson. Good afternoon, Councillor Thompson.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Thank you for your patience in waiting. You have 3 minutes to give your views on this application, and the time will start from when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members and officers. I have two concerns with this application. Firstly, in relation to the external chiller. This is situated next to residential property. An existing chiller is protected by a walled area. The proposed new chiller protects well above the height of the existing perimeter. There is no actual height dimension of the proposed chiller provided by the applicant. I have requested details, but none have been supplied. The footprint is 5.4 by 2 metres. This is a substantial piece of machinery. The concern I share with that expressed by the occupants of the two nearest residential properties is that noise levels from this substantial piece of equipment could be intrusive into their lives, particularly during the night, and the environmental impact could be intolerable. I have previously requested projected decibel levels from the operation, but these have not been supplied. Whilst I note that a condition has been requested, I do feel that this should have been addressed before the decision is requested. For my part, I believe that the height of the surrounding walled area should have been raised to contain any sound emissions as a contribution to mitigation. I would ask that you consider deferral of this application until a full examination of the sound emissions is carried out and any mitigation agreed to address these. I accept that there is sound arising from the garage operations during the day, but outside the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m, residents should have the right of peaceful existence and not be disturbed by unacceptable levels of commercially generated sound. My second concern reflects those already raised by residents. This is the inappropriateness of the installation of a 24-hour laundrette. It is a business usually associated with town centre operations. It's quite inappropriate to the street scene where it is positioned in the approach to the town. No additional car parking is proposed in an area of extremely limited parking. 24-hour usage will result in out-of-hours activity, which can only result in additional nocturnal noise levels. I would request that if members are minded to accept this recommendation, that a management operations plan is considered as a condition. The management operation plan would detail how the laundrette is operated to operate safely in the interest of neighbour amenity. The safety elements would include managing the site to ensure the limited pavement is kept unobstructed, the machines are kept clean and checked on a regular basis, that a litter maintenance check is maintained, that an out-of-hours help facility is available in the event of machine operation failure, and all this to maintain environmental standards and minimise any adverse impact on the local environment and community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Do we have any questions for Councillor Thompson? You're obviously the ward councillor for Saltburn, as so am I. I just would wonder, do you want to explain to the committee some of the issues we have in relation to the highway access and area of the co-op?
Well, I can offer a view on that, Chair. Members may have had the opportunity of a site visit, but the road that runs past the main sign, which demonstrates the garage, which is off the highway, is very limited. So there are frequent concerns about parking, and there are frequent concerns about the capacity for people to pass safely. Quite frequently, cars do park round on Wilton Bank, which is double yellow lines, and I know that's nothing to do with planning, but clearly that demonstrates that there is a concern for capacity. Now, if additional persons are going to come, and it's hypothetical because I don't know the business plan details, to use this facility, I'm talking about the 24-hour operation of the laundrette, then there must be greater footfall. So if there is greater footfall, there is going to be either people carrying laundry baskets and walking to the site, or coming by car. So if they are coming by car, during the day certainly, there will be higher demand than exists currently, and we already know that the existing system is stressed. So that's a particular concern that has been expressed by lots of residents from a safety point of view, which is one of the reasons why I've asked for a management operations plan to be in place so that people queuing or attending and wishing to take advantage of the service are properly managed so that we do not have an issue with pedestrian safety. That's one of the key elements here. I could talk about people's street scene and how people feel about that. I think all of those comments have been available on the portal, so it's not for me necessarily to stress these, that they are available for members to understand. But if there are no planning reasons to say that this cannot be accepted, clearly there is a facility in the town, but because there is not a requirement for an impact assessment on anything lower than 200 square meters footage, this does not apply in this particular instance. So I just come back, Chair, to saying that on the basis of planning approval and there being no reason for objection that members may wish to consider, it's really important that we do consider as a condition a management operations plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rubbin, do you have a question? Councillor Ovens? I think she seems to have departed from her screen. Whilst we're waiting for Councillor Ovens, we are approaching our 3-hour allotted time. Can we have approval to suspend standing orders? Can someone move those, please?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Baldwin, and I think it was Councillor Lockwood, or Councillor Head, sorry. To 1:30?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Right, so we don't seem to have Councillor Ovens. So if there's no further questions for Councillor Thompson, I will thank him for his attendance and his comments on this application. Okay, do we have any queries or yes, Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a query for Claire. I'm now a bit confused because I've heard this laundry unit was just a washing machine. You could stand on the grass and put your washing in. I thought it was for the use of the petrol station. Is it for public use, this thing? Because it doesn't sound appropriate for public use.
Yes, it's for public use, so it's on the end of the building as a sort of standalone structure. It's not connected into the service station in any way, and the doors for the washing machines are on the edge, so you would come along and put your washing in it. Yeah, but it's not accessed from within inside the co-op. It's a standalone freestanding structure on the edge of the building.
Thank you.
Any other queries before I open it up for debate? Okay, we don't, so I'll open it up for debate. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a problem with the chiller because the condition 3 will cover any noise there. What I do have is a problem with the laundrette. I don't think it's an appropriate place to have a laundrette that is going to be open to the elements. It's going to be visible from the highway and from other residential properties around. I'm sorry, but do you really want to watch other people doing their dirty washing? So my objection to this is the laundrette, and therefore I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Foggo. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Foggo. Since I found it was a public resource, I think it's totally inappropriate in this area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Head.
With the laundrette, you've got 3 laundrettes there, or 3 machines, very close to the edge of the pavement. It's going to be where people are going to stand, fill the machines. They won't walk away from them. They'll sit there or sit in their car for maybe an hour. So I don't think it's appropriate because there's only 3 parking spaces out with the service station, possibly 1 where the sign is, and I think you're going to have people waiting there if they use the machines for maybe 1 hour, and it's at the side of the road, and I think it's a traffic hazard. That's my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Head. Councillor Lockwood.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with all the comments concerning the laundrette in inverted commas, but also I've got real concerns about the chiller unit. You know, I know there's a condition 3 about putting. I assume they're going to put soundproofing around it, but in the dead of night, I do not think that any soundproofing would mitigate a chiller unit that is right up against somebody's boundary fence. And all I can say, if that was my house there, I think I would have been wanting to speak at this committee myself, and they must have a lot of faith in Councillor Thompson to put this into his hands. That's all I can say. So I'll definitely be voting against this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lockwood. Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just following on as regarding the noise. See, the rule of thumb is if you can hear the noise from machinery, etc., inside your house, then the source has to be downgraded. Indeed, the HSC, such machinery, etc., has to be, it has a dBA restriction on such noise. And the applicant has to adhere to that. And again, the applicant can get that information there from the manufacturer. And noise is and has been there for decades and decades a very serious problem, not only in industry, but also in residential areas. So I would recommend that if the noise is going to be a problem there before we make a decision, that the applicant provides more information as regards the noise there, which would be emanating there from such machinery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. I may be able to offer some expertise on both sides, the laundry and the chiller unit. As somebody who works in an industrial coal store, I don't really have too many concerns about the noise. The place I work at has just changed from an old unit to a new unit, which is so quiet. We have to keep checking on it to make sure it's working. It sounds like it's completely broken down and isn't running at all whatsoever. So things do exist out there that do enable them to be truly silent. On the laundrette side, I don't use a public laundrette. I do have a washing machine at home. However, I do keep some rather strange hours. I work 2 in the morning till 10 in the morning, and then go to bed normally. So as someone who exists outside of normal working times and struggles to go to the shop and meet normal living requirements, I do understand a need for a 24-hour laundrette. However, I think the need for a 24-hour laundrette isn't within a residential area. It should be around B&Bs, hotels, and where contractors would stay. And I would suggest that isn't this area. So while it's probably a good idea in theory, it probably is in the wrong place. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Ovens.
Yeah, sorry to prolong this, Stuart. It's just with regarding to you even getting your laundry there. I think Councillor Thompson referred to people sort of lugging stuff across to it. Already people sometimes just park outside. They're not necessarily getting petrol. They just want to pick something up from the shop or do a little bit of shopping. I just can't just see total congestion in that area. And I think to propose something like this without specific parking is not really acceptable. And under sort of all of our tourism efforts, is this really what we want to show people on the way into Saltburn? Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor Ovens. I will make comment. I've left it to the last to hear what people are saying. And it's disappointing, councillors, that we don't have the agent or the applicant to speak on this application and hear what his thoughts are in relation to the laundrette. It is an interesting addition to the building, to say the least, and where it's located. I'm just not comfortable with it where it is, because it is visible from the main road into the town. I do take on board that we've got the Amazon locker there and the large advertisement screen for the Co-op petrol station. But when you look at it, it's a much larger feature and a more prominent feature from the street scene. So one of my reasons is that it would have a negative impact on the street scene, and also it would have an adverse impact on the neighbourhood amenity with additional noise. I know there is noise created there, but if it's going to be 24 hours, then that's going to have a negative impact on the neighbourhood amenity. In relation to the cooler, yeah, I take on board what Councillor Baldwin has said. He's obviously the expert at the moment on chillers, but I have concerns again, because they haven't provided the information in relation how that's going to be dealt with. And the properties on Wilton Bank are very close to that side. So that also gives me some concerns. So I do have concerns in relation to this application, and it would have been nice to hear the views of the applicant and the reason why they thought there is a need. I know that's not a planning application, a planning reason to refuse, but why they thought it would be a good idea. Normally, you find them, I think, in town centres where there's a high student accommodation area, not in a residential location on the outskirts of a town. So yeah, I just think it's a badly thought out idea. Councillor Foggo.
Thank you, Chair. As far as I remember, there is already a laundrette on Milton Street. It's a walk-in one where people go inside and do the laundry. So this outside one just doesn't work with me. So I will propose that we refuse this application.
On what grounds?
Neighbourhood amenity and street scene.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Do we have any other motions in relation to this application? If that is the case, then I will go to the vote. And the first one is Councillor Morgan.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Baldwin.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lockwood.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ovens.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. I'm next and I refuse. Councillor Head.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Foggo.
Refuse, Chair.
And Councillor Eyre.
Refuse, Chair.
Okay, the votes, please.
9 in favour of refusal, Chair. None against.
Thank you. And so that is the application for the external chiller and laundrette at sides in replacement of coal bunkers up front. The cooperative Saltburn service station, Mask Road, Saltburn, has been refused by the committee.
Chair, just before you move on to the next agenda item, my apologies, I have to leave.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you for your attendance today. And
Bye,
need
everybody.
Thank you. I need to apologise to Councillor Watts because I think I've missed out a question in relation to that. So apologies. When we get in face-to-face meetings, I will not miss you then. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, if you're still with us, for your attendance and your comments on this application. Okay, we have a final application and I'm looking at the time. Claire, are you comfortable that we will have enough time to hear this application, or do we need to extend before we start?
You've extended till past, so we've got 24 minutes. We've got 3 speakers down for the item, so we may need a little bit longer, obviously depending on how many questions members have. The remainder of the agenda is just the delegated reports. After this item, it's just the delegated report section 106 and the usual updates, which I can take by questions by email for those. So it is really just this one more item that it would be good to get through if we could today. But it may take us a bit past 1:30.
Chair, Councillor Foggo here. I'm going to have to depart about 25 past.
Right, so
I think we should crack on because we've got these people who've been waiting to speak so long, and if it takes a few extra 5-10 minutes, so be it.
Yes, my sentiments exactly. I was thinking that Councillor Clark has been waiting quite patiently for the whole meeting. Councillor Foggo, I don't think we're probably going to get to the vote, but by the time you have to leave, but obviously stay if you wish, and then depart whenever you have to.
As I won't be able to take part in the vote, I'll depart now.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
That's understandable. Thank you. Okay. The next application is R 2020-0824, the erection of 4 2-storey, 2-bedroom dwellings, land to the rear west of the Globe at 81 Northgate, Gisborough, and the office recommendation is approval. Claire, your report, please.
So I will share.
Can I just stop you there, Claire? Sorry, Councillor Watts, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. It's just that this application is for land on Northgate, Gisborough, but all the diagrams said Westgate, Gisborough.
Okay, can you clarify where it is?
The Globe, I think, is on Northgate, which is why that will have pulled it through, because we've linked it to the address point as the Globe. So it's land to the rear of the Globe. The Globe's on Northgate. This site's to the west of the Globe. So it might become clear when I share the presentation as to what you can see. Hopefully you can see that presentation. So this is the Globe outlined in blue, which is on Northgate, which is the address point it's pulled through when we've plotted the site. The application site is to the rear of the Globe. The Westgate at the bottom of that presentation is an error. I do apologise for that on the presentation. So it's the application site outlined in red. The land also of the Globe is also owned by the applicant, which is why it's adjoined in blue. Then got the proposed site plan. The proposed elevations and the internal rear elevation, and then photos showing the site. So that's the views from Balco Street, so the side elevation of the wall where the buildings will go and the existing Globe building. Views of the front elevation of what will become the 2-storey dwellings, down the existing terrace street, and then views over from the adjacent street over the neighbour's front garden. So I'll just leave that up so you can see the front elevation of the property. I'll find my report. So as the chair said, it's permission sought for 4 2-storey 2-bedroom dwellings on land to the rear of the former Globe Public House. The application site is actually the corner of Balco Street and Hewitt's building. The application site, as I said, is on a corner plot. It's square, flat, and is currently accessed via Balco Street. It was previously used as a beer garden, parking area, and a smoking area by users of the Globe. The boundaries you can see from the photos is demarked by a solid high brick wall, and the Globe, and then the terrace properties. The 4 dwellings proposed would be 2-storey terrace properties with garden areas and pedestrian access paths to the rear. The dwellings would be red multi-facing brick, grey concrete tiles and UPVC windows and doors. There is no parking associated with the properties. As you can see from the photos, the predominant building type in the area is 2-storey terrace properties, although there is a mix in the scale and design in the wider area. 5 dwellings were originally proposed, however the 5th dwelling was removed following negotiations and the scheme amended to 4 dwellings. The Globe as a public house stopped trading last year and has recently had planning permission to be converted into residential accommodation. The relevant policies are listed on page 55 of the report along with the planning history. As a result of the consultation, we've had 16 representations making the comments on page 55 and 56. Gisborough Town Council are objecting and their comments are included on page 56. And as Ward Member Councillor Bill Clark has made comments and they're included on page 56 and 57 in full. Northumbrian Water have made their standard comments in terms of surface water drainage. Northern Power Grid have made comments in relation to the need to be aware of cables and safety requirements. The development engineer's comments are included in full on page 58 and I'll pick that up in the contents of the report. Environmental Protection have raised no objections subject to the use of conditions in relation to both contaminated land and nuisance. In terms of principle, the application site is within the limits in an established residential area. The site is in a sustainable location, a short walking distance from a range of shops and services within the designated centre of Gisborough and a range of public transport routes. The dwellings proposed reflect those in the existing area, and given the size of the development, there would be no expectation for a mix of dwellings to be provided within the site. The principle is acceptable and accords with the aims of policies SD3, SD4 and H2 of the local plan. In terms of character and appearance, the application site is to the rear of the Globe in a predominantly residential area. The proposed dwellings are 2-storey brick-built 2-bedroom terrace properties, reflecting the character and appearance of the area and the other dwellings within the street scene. A condition is recommended for materials to ensure there be no adverse impact, and subject to these conditions, the proposal accords with Part J of Policy SD4. In terms of neighbour amenity, the proposed 4 dwellings would front the dwellings to the west, Dunclair, which is located on Priory Close. This dwelling is set back from the plot and has an area of garden space to the front, which you can see in the photo. Given the position of the proposed dwellings in relationship, there's no overlooking or loss of privacy to the existing dwelling. Given the layout and relationship, there is no loss of privacy, overlooking or overbearing impacts on the dwellings to the south of the application site. To the north, dwellings are located on Bolco Street and these have direct access to the street and the road with no front gardens. Plot 1 of the application site is some 12.2 metres from the front elevation of these properties, and the level of separation is considered acceptable. The rear elevations of the proposed dwellings would face the rear elevation of the existing Globe building, which has been converted to residential, which has consent and work undergoing for conversion to residential. The proposed dwellings would be between 6.7 metres and 12 metres from the rear elevation of the Globe. We acknowledge this is below the standard separation distance in the residential areas SPD. However, given that both the application site and the Globe are in the same ownership and that the existing relationship between dwellings in this area is at this level, in this instance it's considered acceptable. The site is within an established residential area where there is likely to be some short-term disturbance during construction, and therefore the conditions recommended by Environmental Protection are reasonable and necessary. Subject to the conditions, there'd be no adverse impact in terms of neighbour amenity, and the application accords with Part B of Policy SD4. In terms of highways, the majority of dwellings in the area do not have within curtilage parking, and no parking is provided by part of the development. The Council's development engineers have confirmed the dwellings will not benefit from permit parking, as they fall outside the permit parking area. The development, however, is within a sustainable location, close proximity to a range of shops and services, and public car parks. The Council's development engineers have therefore raised no objections to the proposal, and the application accords with Part P of Policy SD4. There are no objections from Northumbrian Water. The application raised no issues in terms of crime prevention. The recommended contaminated land condition is considered reasonable and necessary, and subject to the conditions listed on page 62, 63, 64 and 65 of the report, the recommendation is to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Do we have any queries in relation to Claire's report? Claire, can we just drill down on in relation to parking? Normally when we get an application for houses, there has to be an allocated, is it a 1.25 space or something ridiculous like that for each property? Why haven't we insisted that there is parking, off-street parking in relation to this development?
So the MPPF talks about parking provision, as does the local plan, and it talks also about sustainability and sustainable access. Normally, you're right, we do ask for parking, and that level's provided for in the Highways Design Guide specifications. We would also look at the street scene in terms of what exists around there, to whether or not it would be suitable to start introducing a different sort of house type, a different layout, and also the relationship to town centres. Now, within or on the edge of town centres, the MPPF is quite clear that their sustainable location with existing, suitable access to public transport, range of services and facilities, and access to public car parks. This site is, while it's not in the centre, it's very close to the designated centre, and therefore in a highly sustainable location with access to a range of services and public car parking. So it's the opinion of your officers that you wouldn't win an argument on highways grounds given the location and the relationship.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Again, on parking, I completely disagree that this property is near town centre parking. The only parking area is Reed Terrace, which is quite small. All the other car parks are the other side of the town centre. I don't think any of that is convenient to this site, and there is nothing around this site. You've already got a photograph on page 27, looking at the wall and the little street behind, with cars parked on double yellow lines, which is suggestive there is a problem.
Councillor Watts, is this a statement or is this a
Yeah,
query?
I'm questioning why.
I think Claire's already answered it because I asked it. I mean, if you in relation to what you just said, I'm sure that you'll be able to mention that at the appropriate time. But this section is for queries in relation to Claire's report.
Well, I thought that was a query.
Address it as a query.
I'll speak later, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other queries or questions in relation to Claire's report? If that's the case, then we'll move on to our speakers. And our first one in relation to this application is Councillor Andrew Hickson from Gisborough Town Council. Good afternoon, Councillor Hickson.
Good afternoon.
Welcome again to our committee. You have 3 minutes to give your views on this application, and the time will start from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. This application is linked to another planning application at the same location on the change of use of a public house to form 4 two-bedroom flats. As a town council, we object to this application on the grounds that there is no suitable provision made for car parking. The applicant states that according to the planning department of Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council, provision is not needed because the proposed development is close to the town centre and there is a plentiful supply of parking permits. This is blatantly not true. There is not a plentiful supply of permit-only parking provision in the locality, and that is one of the main reasons why the local authority is looking at a new car parking strategy itself. Also, the site does not fall within the nearby residence parking zone, therefore no permits could be issued. As a town council, We also fully support Councillor Bill Clark's comments on refuse, location and parking as have been included in this document pack. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hickson. Do we have any questions from the committee to Councillor Hickson in relation to his comments? I have one. I am aware of where the location is. Is there any residence parking allocation in that area, or is it well out of the zone?
It's out of the zone as far as I'm aware. There's little bits dotted around, but they're all oversubscribed. The streets on it are double lined. It's not the development. So we supported the development of the empty building into some flats, but to build houses without parking facilities in a place where, as from the photos, you can see people parking all over the places. If they were to change the plan to include parking, then we wouldn't be objecting.
Okay, and Bolco Street, that's not residential parking then?
It's complicated around there to say that there's, without a plan in front of me, I'd struggle.
Okay, sorry, that was probably an unfair question to ask you. Any other questions for Councillor Hickson? Okay, we don't seem to. Thank you, Councillor Hickson, for attending and giving your views. We'll now move on to our second speaker, and this is Councillor Bill Clark, the ward councillor for Gisborough ward. Good afternoon, Councillor Clark.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I could clarify that Bolco Street is a residence parking zone only. That's okay. Just to clarify that point for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience in waiting so long to speak. You have 3 minutes to give your views on this application. The time will start from when you start speaking.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee and officers. This development is not included in the local plan and is an overdevelopment for such a small area. I understand we are today only talking about this planning application, but to get a better understanding of the pressure this application places on the surrounding area and residents, you need to also consider a past approved planning application in the main building of the Globe Public House, granted under delegated powers on the 6th of April this year. This has allowed 4 two-bedroom flats to be developed. So if this application today is approved, we will have 8 two-bedroom flats to be developed in a very small area of this part of the town. Also online, I cannot see any measurements, either internal or external. The design and access statement can be misleading under site location. It is not a town centre location and it does not have any public transport links. You should all know that the local authority is in the process of introducing a new resident parking permit system, which has many problems, and the rollout is being temporarily stopped at this time. Under the officer's report, the development engineers quote, it refers to the plentiful supply of permit-only parking provision in the locality, although the site does not fall within the nearby residence parking zone, which I mentioned, Bolco Street, therefore no permits can be issued. This area is oversubscribed for car parking and there is no spare capacity for car parking. So any new vehicles which may come from new residents, where do they park? This could be further exacerbated when the newly refurbished primary care hospital opens within yards of this application, which is due in autumn of this year. Also in this area, and in particular Oak Road, which is behind Bolco Street, this is used to park cars from students at the nearby college and is an overflow for residents who access the hospital for appointments. On refuse bin emptying day, there will be 8 bins lined in a row on a much used pavement approximately 1.8 metres wide. This pavement is used extensively by school children aged from 5 to 11 years old. When the bins are to be emptied, this will introduce a hazard and will block the pavement to resident users of buggies and users of disability wheelchairs. These bins may be a hazard all day until residents return from work. This will enhance the risk as this area is basically a crossroads with a pedestrian crossing and can be extremely busy at certain times of the day, especially when Challoner Primary School opens and closes. This application should be refused, and it would be remiss of me not to object as a ward councillor on the grounds of car parking capacity and more certainly on safety matters. Thank you, Chair, Committee and Officers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do we have any questions for Councillor Clark? Councillor Ovens.
Thank you. I don't know whether you can see it in my chat or not, Stuart. It was really, I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask this, but when the deemed consent went through for the Globe, was there no parking associated with that either, Bill?
No, there's no parking allocated for that either.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Clark? No, we don't seem to. So thank you, Councillor Clark, in attending and giving your views on this application. Appreciated. Okay, we'll move on to our next speaker, and it will either be Mr. McGlynn or Mr. O'Connor. So whoever it is, can you speak up, please, and give your name?
Hi there, this is David McGlynn.
Thank you, Mr. McGlynn. Sorry about that. I had two names down, and I was not sure who was speaking. You are the applicant in relation to this application, and I will give you 3 minutes to give your comments in relation to it, and the time will start when you start speaking. Go ahead.
Thank you. When we first were looking at purchasing the land, we were aware of a previous application, so after speaking to planning, we proposed a different development, so it wasn't the case of knocking down everything that was on the site and putting just apartments. So we felt that developing the pub and putting 4 terrace houses or 5 terrace houses was going to be more suitable for what's in the area. So we listened to what had been rejected before and felt our plan was going to be more realistic. We did try and put 5 houses in, which we then withdrew and amended it to 4 after discussions with planning. So we felt that we were taking into account what was being said. In respect of parking, we do feel as though that the location is a 4-minute walk into town. We've timed that, we've walked it, we've checked where the bus routes are. We're looking at sustainable development, providing starter homes for people who live and work in Gisborough, who potentially will use the local amenities, contribute to the local economy. People's way of working has changed somewhat, so people are working from home a lot more. We're looking at as a wider picture of a society, not to be reliant on cars. So we do feel that using transport, local public transport, is a viable solution. We will be providing bike stores for each of the properties as well, so there's an opportunity for that. The point about the bins, there will be an opportunity for us, we feel, that we can give off-street storage for bins, so they don't have to be wheeled onto the street. So we can look at that, and we take on board the comments made there that the street is the path is quite tight, so there's an opportunity there. In respect of parking, every time I've been to site, which is on a daily basis, I manage to park at different times of the day, after 5, during the course of the day, before 8. So I've always managed to park on Balco, Hewitt's Yard, the small car park that is opposite. The picture on Claire's report is somewhat misleading. The car that is parked isn't on the double yellows, it's in front of the double yellows, and that's parked in an allocated parking spot, which sits outside the front elevation, and we feel there would be space to park 2 cars on Hewitt's Yard. I've parked there numerous times myself, so we feel if there was a need for people to purchase houses who had cars, there is an opportunity to park on Hewitt's Yard or the surrounding area. But more so, we're looking to provide affordable homes for people local who will be living and working in Gisborough, or will be taking the public transport to the surrounding areas, whether they're working in Middlesbrough or whatnot. We will be providing bike stores. We will be able to look at off-street bin storage, and we feel that the site as it stands is an eyesore. The pub was poorly managed, wasn't maintained, the building wasn't maintained. We're going to breathe life back into that, and we think putting 4 houses on there will be a realistic opportunity for the area.
Thank you, Mr. McGlynn.
Thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you for your comments. Questions from councillors, and we have one from Councillor Watts.
Yes, good afternoon. You mentioned that you easily parked in Balco Street. That is in fact residential parking, so I don't quite know how you managed to park there. Yes, it is not clear from this photo where these yellow lines stop, but I would concede that that road looks very narrow. There's only a tiny pavement.
That's correct. Hewitt's Yard is narrow. There's no pavement on Hewitt's Yard, and people already park there. The yellow lines are at the end of on the corner of the road where it meets Balco Street. That's where it tapers in. So you wouldn't park on the yellow lines, because then that would make turning into Hewitt's Yard somewhat tight. But behind the yellow lines where that vehicle sits, that's where people park on Hewitt's Yard. And our houses face onto Hewitt's Yard. We have 4 front doors there. Outside 2 of those houses, there will be sufficient parking space there before the yellow lines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Any other questions for Mr. McGlynn? Okay, we don't. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you for your comments and answering our queries in relation to it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, do we have any queries in relation or questions for Claire before I open it up for debate? Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually for Helen, if I can. There's been a lot of talk about parking and residence parking. Looking on the council website, that area does have residential permit parking, which isn't argued. I think Councillor Clark mentioned that. But there's resident parking in Balco Street and Northgate and Union Street. Can I just clarify that that's accurate, Helen?
Yeah, I checked with the licensing team, and to be included in a residence parking zone, your property needs to be listed, and 81 Northgate isn't listed on any residence parking permit zone, so they won't get permits. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Could they not then register and ask for permits?
I think the order would have to be changed to do that, but residence parking, I believe, is 8 in the morning till 6 at night for residents, and outside of that, I believe anyone can park in it if there's free space.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Claire, there was mention, I think Councillor Clark mentioned that this allocated site was not within the local plan, but I understand there is a proviso in relation to that for smaller developments. Can you explain that, please?
So the local plan only allocates sites for more than 10 dwellings. Anything less than 10 dwellings is considered a windfall site. So because it's only 4 dwellings, it would never have been allocated as a housing site. However, it is in limits. It's previously developed land attached to the commercial building. It's in a predominant residential area, so it accords with the policies in terms of development for residential dwellings.
Thank you, Claire. Any other questions or queries for Claire before I move on to open it up for debate? Okay, we don't, so I will move it open for debate and a possible motion.
Yeah, can I ask, sorry, we've discussed it in the past, and I'm asking for clarity off Claire, I suppose, about pre-existing problems. So there's a pre-existing problem with parking. Can we take that into account?
So you can't allow this application. Well, start again. You can't determine this application based on existing problems. This application can't solve existing problems that exist in the area. So you couldn't control sort of existing parking provision. You do have to look at whether or not this development would be acceptable in a range of terms, one of which, because obviously where we're going is highways terms. You would have to take into consideration the location of this one, the existing relationship to the, is it a sustainable location in close access, which your officers feel it is, and therefore recommended for approval. But yeah, highways would be a matter for consideration.
Okay, Councillor Ovens.
I probably should have asked this question of Claire earlier on, but the town centre parking that is referred to, none of that would be free. It would either be to pay for or have a disc for, which gives you very limited period of time. So I don't think suggesting town centre parking is a very viable option.
Is that a statement or a question?
Well, it could be a question as to whether I'm right or not, but it's also a statement.
Claire, do you wish to answer that?
The reason you often accept that people can park in town centre locations is because usually after 6 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock in the morning, public car parks are free. So while people are out of work, they're out at work, they're not having to pay for the parking. And then when they return home on a night, they can park in the public car parks for free. Obviously, people will move into this area knowing what they move into. People are moving in knowing they haven't got parking spaces, and some people don't require car parking spaces and are happy with that walking and accessibility to town centre, especially in sustainable locations.
Can I just add on to that? I think there'll even be difficulty in sort of getting a removal van or anything and moving your stuff in, but that's beyond the planning committees.
It is Councillor Ovens. Okay, then I don't normally like to give my comments first, but I will move things on. In relation to this application, it is within development limits. It is a previous brownfield site. The Globe is being redeveloped, and this was previously the beer garden. So it is a brownfield site. We're bringing that back into use, and it is in an established residential area. The appearance seems to be suitable for the street scene. It's terrace property. It will just continue into Hewitt's Yard, which consists of terrace properties, and it's pleasing to see that it's 2-bedroom properties. Again, I'll go back to the other application. We do need to increase the number of properties that are for starter homes, 2-bedroom properties. It'll be a reasonable price, you would hope. I do take on board the concerns in relation to parking, but I think we're on a weak sticky wicket in relation to refusing it on the grounds that there's no parking outside, when it has been explained fully to us that there is parking, and it is within the town centre. It is about 4 minutes walking from the town centre. So my recommendation, or I will be voting for this application. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. To start with, I think it's very unfortunate that a delegated decision was made on the Globe separate to these other premises, because what had been mooted before was a general plan for that whole site. This is a sort of add-on. I agree it's a residential area. I have no problem with the houses, But if you're putting starter homes and you've got about half a mile walk to limited parking, if you've got a buggy or you're going out for the day, how do you carry all the stuff you're going to load into the car to the other side of Gisborough? There is a way round it. If parking space had been made on the properties. Without that, I think all the objections we've heard, it's impossible to park round there most of the time. He is going to make bin provision on the site, but I think it is going to cause significant problems in the area and exacerbate the existing problems. Without sensible thinking of parking, I can't agree to this.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Head.
This is a 2-bedroom properties, which I think is an affordable to a lot of new people who want to start up. They're going to buy it on the basis that they know there's no parking, so it's up to them when they put the offer in. But I think it is bringing back a site in there, which is, what else can you put on it, really? And I think I would support that application.
Thank you, Councillor Head. Any other comments from councillors? If that's the case, can I have a motion, please? Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Chair. As somebody who lives very near to a town centre in Redcar, we know the score with parking. We live in a resident parking permit area where it's difficult to park at times. Sometimes we have to park streets away and just hope that a space is going to become available later on. We've talked parking to death. Parking is a problem. It's not that much of a problem that can't be overcome with some walking, to be honest, and I apologise for saying that. Bank stores are being made available, and again, I think we'd be on weak ground to refuse on an issue that's been covered in the report and not being shown as a problem. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, Chair, to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I will second Councillor Baldwin's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other motions in relation to it? Okay, we don't seem to, so I will go to the vote. And we start with Councillor Morgan.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baldwin.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Head.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ovens.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Lockwood.
Refuse, Chair.
Thank you. I'm next and I'm approving. And Councillor Watts.
Refuse.
Can I have the vote list, please?
3 refusals, 3 approvals and 1 abstention.
Well, this is a first.
Sorry, Stuart.
Well, I'm going to have to go with my original vote, and that is to approve the application. So that will presume make it 4-3.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay, it had to come at some point. So in relation to the erection of 4 number 2-storey 2-bedroom dwellings, land to the rear of the Globe, 81 Northgate, Gisborough, the application has been approved. Thank you, and thank you to our speakers in relation to this application. Right, councillors, time is getting on, and can I suggest, if with your approval, that under the delegated decisions and the appeal information and the enforcement schedule and section 106 agreements, if you have any queries that you, and the Q4 performance, that you contact Claire with them. I think we could bring back the Q4 performance to our next meeting, Claire, if that's okay, because I think we need to look at that. Although there's no issues.
That's good to know, and that's fine. I'll bring it back.
Okay. Is everyone happy with that, councillors?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry again. It's been a long meeting, and it hasn't run that smoothly this morning, but we got there in the end. And of course, we can all look forward to being back face to face.
Woo!
Okay. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you for your contribution today. Much appreciated, and take care.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart. Bye.